Let's get peppy. Welcome to PEP 135. That's PEP or Planet Extra podcast. It's an offshoot of Planet America on the ABC Australia, which you can see on Friday at 8 p.m. on ABC News Channel, or you might have just seen it on Wednesday night for a change at 9:30 p.m. on ABC TV. This is a very special Wednesday podcast. And you can see on iView, on Facebook at ABC Planet America, and on YouTube at the ABC In-Depth channel. On PEP, we cover all the stuff that is too nerdy for TV, especially the Wednesday show tonight. If you're listening, you can also see this podcast on Facebook and YouTube. I'm starting to sound like a race caller, Dave. So let me introduce Dr. Pepper himself, Dr. Dave Smith. Hey, Dave.
I like your special apologeticness about the Wednesday show. That's the really lowbrow one.
Yeah, the Wednesday show's a bit more entertaining than we don't get into the Pepper-like content on the Wednesday show.
Yes.
You can sense the contempt. But look, I'll take all viewers. Don't get me wrong. Give us everyone's favourite disclaimer.
I'm an associate professor at the United States Studies Centre at the University of Sydney, but I do not speak for either of those institutions. As regular listeners of PEP will know, frequently I don't even speak for my future self, as in 1 or 2 hours into the future. You're really just getting my real-time opinions as they are happening. And sorry, it's my fault that there was no PEP on Friday because I had a conference panel to chair on that day, which I forgot about until the morning of PEP. So my particular apologies to Chaz and to all of the Peppers for that one.
That's okay. If you're wondering why all the stuff I've got prepared for this week sounds like it was written 6 days ago, now you know why.
It was.
Tell us what you're grateful for, Dave, if anything.
I'm grateful for the word foolhardy.
Foolhardy. You like that word? It's a good word.
Yeah. Because I don't know how it came into being.
Yeah.
But yeah, because it basically means, well, maybe not exactly the same thing as foolish, but it's just such a great word.
Yeah, it's like you're hardy of a fool.
I don't know, but whatever. It sounds great. It's fun to use. It's broadly applicable to a wide range of situations.
And I'm sure it's got nothing to do with the fact that I told Dave today we'd be talking a lot about Elon Musk. I've got a couple of quickies. These are both quick. I was going to say, originally I planned this week to be grateful for PrEP, because I was reading a very lengthy article about PrEP about a week ago. PrEP is the treatment that stops HIV spreading.
Okay.
And I learnt...
I thought you were talking about your own preparation for PEP.
Oh, I see. No, I'm not.
There's...
I'm definitely not grateful for that.
Okay.
That robs me of a lot of sleep.
Okay. Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's necessary. But no, PrEP is a treatment for HIV to stop spreading. And I learnt this week, I knew about PrEP for a while. What I learnt this week was that in clinical trials, it's 99% effective. Now, in the real world, people don't necessarily use it the way you're meant to use it, so it's not 99% effective. But that's amazing.
Yes.
Like as someone who was scared shitless by the Grim Reaper ads when I was a little kid, the fact that
as you were supposed to be,
only what 25, 30 years later, they got just about a 100% protection against HIV.
That is exceptional. Yes.
Amazing.
That is real progress.
So as a pepper, I'm grateful for the preppers.
Yes.
But that's a quick one. The other one, which I'm grateful for, is I just had to say this, which is the kind of comments we've been receiving on Facebook lately.
Okay.
And on YouTube about this podcast. In particular, the questions we get asked and the critiques that you guys offer.
Yes.
I don't reply to many of them because, there's a lot.
Yeah.
But I do love them. So I want to put it out there. I'm super conscious in particular of the fact that we deal with some fairly spicy material at times.
We do, yes.
Like I can tell you the ABC, they don't like you talking about Gaza very much. We just tread all over that. And you as viewers could punish us at times for things that we say, especially me. And I am grateful for the fact, given the sheer volume of mindless bad faith takes there are out there on this and many other issues.
Yes.
When it comes to politics, where people take maximalist positions, they accuse their opponents of the most horrible things. That does not happen on our channel in the commenters. And I really, really appreciate the civility and the goodwill in your comments. Even when you completely disagree with us, and that happens a lot. That's fine. And so I am super, super grateful for that.
That is definitely something to be grateful for.
Like,
yes.
I would say, I don't want to be too serious here, but a better way on the internet starts with all of us. And I do love that the peppers are creating a little oasis from the sewage.
Yes. Good.
So, hopefully it grows. Anyway, we've got 2 examples right here, Dave. I have 2 questions for you about the fascist thing, which a number of people disagreed with us and you on. Yep. So let me throw 2 comments right at yours. Read them out.
Yes.
Mikhail, first of all. On the question of competent officials, isn't the more pernicious risk that a disastrous fresh wave of loyal officials produces a cadre of experienced and loyal officials who can then train future generations and develop critical mass? So that is, in fact, possible to fill out the ranks with loyal and competent officials in the future. The idea of a legacy that lives beyond Trump's possible second term is surely more concerning when coupled with the second prong of this new movement, MAGA politicians like Gates, Vance, and MTG. It doesn't address the checks and balances of federalism and judiciary, but it adds another piece to the puzzle. So, Dr. Dave, would the experience of the Russian Revolution be instructive? A fairly large-scale purge of the bureaucracy resulted in a catastrophic few decades, but that system was eventually remade to at least be somewhat competent by the middle-late stages of the USSR. Couldn't the same be said of interwar and early war Germany? Or have I missed something about these examples by assuming too true loyalty or a higher degree of competence than they actually had?
Well, that is a fantastic question. And I think that what differentiates this situation from those is the lack of a revolutionary ideology or program. So that was why you had that sort of generational building of capacity going on. There was the sense that they were building a new world, that they were building new nations. I don't really get the sense of that with MAGA. For a start, once there's no more Trump, then it's going to be quite hard to figure out what it's actually all about. There are actually going to be very different competing strands of thought about what makes MAGA. And just to take the examples that you mentioned of Matt Gaetz and J.D. Vance, J.D. Vance's vision of a good society is very different from Matt Gaetz's. Okay, to the extent that anything can be discerned about Matt Gaetz, he's far more at the libertarian end of things, whereas J.D. Vance has really bought into the whole kind of neo-reactionary idea that the ideal America is one where there's enough state support that you only need one working parent in each household. They've got, their attitudes towards sex, drugs, a lot of the things that people care about, work, are very, very different, but both of them claim the MAGA mantle. Now, obviously in revolutionary movements, there's a lot of disagreement as well, but I think that the point I want to make is that especially for the elites who are backing Trump, on whom he is pretty dependent, their vision is not of a country reborn or a world made new. It's basically about protecting their shit. Okay, it is about, if anything, those revolutionary ideologies required really building a new state, building a new government. If anything, the MAGA movement requires basically degrading government as much as possible and instead going back to something like what existed between about 1890 and the 1940s in the South, which was very little in the way of government, low taxes, very low service provision, and basically local elites, local oligarchs were able to do whatever they wanted. I think that is the core constituency of Trump's elites, that's basically what they want. They want this low tax, basically no government service paradise where they can do whatever they want. That is not a revolutionary vision. That's really just about dismantling bits of the government that have been created in the last 70 years or so, and they can probably do that pretty effectively just by degrading the standard of government as much as possible. So I don't think that training new generations of competent officials is actually going to be part of that program at all. So it does all come back to that lack of an actual revolutionary ideology.
Okay. And the second question is from Sauerkraut, who asks, bearing in mind points about the foreign boogeyman aspect of the fascistic claim on the part of those hurling fascist at Trump, along with Dave's insight about the required totalitarian ingredients to fascism, I would be curious to hear his view on whether the insurrection and Trump's incitement of it is perhaps a fascistic exception to the nature of Trumpism more broadly.
Yeah.
I don't have an axe to grind on it, but feel that some whose historical and linguistic education is often lower may be justified in their use of the term in context. Perhaps I'm splitting hairs, though, around what is accurate and what is the discourse, when the point is to merge the former into the latter.
Yeah, look, that is a very good point. And I would certainly say there were elements in that crowd that day who had something like revolutionary intent, who actually thought that they were really going to cause something major. They thought that Trump would be there with them. They thought that military and law enforcement would basically take their side. But then again, there were a lot of people there for whom this was basically just a carnival. And you know, they didn't really expect there to be any consequences of it. They seemed to be enjoying themselves. I mean, things obviously got pretty serious at some points. There was this real mix of people there in the crowd. And yeah, there were genuine fascists there. I think there were genuine fascists there who wanted to bring everything to such a point of crisis that they believed that when the time came, the military and law enforcement would join them and they would basically seize everything and create the new America that they wanted. But there were, you know, plenty of other people there that day who were there who were there for the show, there for the carnival. Someone pointed out it had much more of the atmosphere of a good old-fashioned American lynching than it did of a fascist insurgency, at least for a lot of the people who were there.
And just to be clear to people, lynchings, while now the word lynching is associated with horrible things, there was a time when it was entertainment.
Yeah, it was absolutely entertainment. Yes. Yeah. As horrific as that is, it actually really was that kind of carnival atmosphere. Yes.
Yeah, like the gladiators, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for those answers. I knew that'd be good. Okay, I read an interesting piece about this. I'm not sure what I think. I want to throw this idea at you and see what you think. The piece is actually about the Stanford prison experiment, a famous experiment from the 70s where they got normal people to play prisoners and prison guards. And before long, the fake prison guards became genuinely sadistic and dehumanizing towards the fake prisoners.
Yes.
Right? Okay, in 2007, this experiment was called into question in a study by Thomas Carnahan and Sam McFarland, where they noted that Zimbardo, who was the guy who conducted the experiment, his recruitment ad for the Stanford prison experiment called for volunteers to participate in, quote, a psychological study of prison life. And these people wondered whether saying prison life created a stacked set of experimental subjects.
Yeah, quite possibly.
So they recreated the original ad.
Yes.
And then they ran a separate ad omitting the phrase prison life and to see if they got different kinds of people.
Okay.
And they found that the people who thought that they would be participating in a prison study had significantly higher levels of aggressiveness, authoritarianism, Machiavellianism, narcissism, and social dominance. And they scored lower on empathy and altruism. Okay, now what's that got to do with Trump? Maybe Trump, and this is what the article was positing.
Yes.
Maybe Trump, none of this is my idea.
Okay.
Maybe Trump has spent the last 8 years running an ad calling for authoritarians, essentially.
Yeah.
And especially now with his plans for centralized control, the vengeful iron fist that he's selling hard at the moment.
Yes.
Maybe Trump supporters as a group might be becoming increasingly aggressive, authoritarian, Machiavellian, narcissistic, and socially dominant through filtering with less empathy and altruism. And if so, regardless of any specific plans for Project 2025 or anything whatsoever that he's saying, the only people who would volunteer to work in his administration after all that filtering would be these nasty types. So regardless of what his plans are, we'll end up with an extremely nasty government, akin to a fascist government or whatever. What do you think about that? Even without the ideology, I'm saying.
Yeah, no. Once again, though, I think that nasty, yes. Fascist, no.
I understand.
And it's not just ideology; it's the capacity of the state that they would be building.
Yeah.
Ultimately, they want less capacity, not more.
Yeah. Okay. And one more thought. This has got nothing to do with fascism at all, but just on this general topic. we're talking about Trump a lot. This is not just Trump. Nikki Haley, I found this really interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Nikki Haley, as part of her policies, has pledged to impose a term limit on all civil servants.
Wow.
That term limit is 5 years. She doesn't have the purge element that Trump does, and she doesn't have the we're going to hire a bunch of conservatives element.
Yeah.
But all the things that we talked about last week apply to her as well with a 5-year term.
Yeah.
We think about...
Is that a term that they then have to reapply for, or is that you can't serve more than 5 years in the government?
I don't know. I hope it's the former.
It is an absolute recipe for disaster if the idea is you can't serve more than 5 years.
I was going to say, there's so many jobs that require more than 5 years training.
Yes.
Like an air traffic controller or a scientist. I
shouldn't be laughing. But,
NASA, working at NASA. You need more than 5 years training. So you'd be getting rid of people faster than you could replace them.
Yes.
So I don't know the answer to that question.
This doesn't sound like the best thought out policy.
No, it doesn't. But even aside from that, she's also got another policy that you have to vote. The Congress would vote on every rule, which would be a recipe to cripple the government entirely.
Yes.
Because then you'd have like Matt Gaetz voting on like financial rules, minor financial rules and regulations about the upkeep of mammograms.
Does she have
stuff.
a federal balanced budget amendment as well?
I imagine she would.
To complete the set?
I imagine she would. I don't know, but I imagine she would. But anyway, but the reason I bring it up is it's not just Haley either. Like according to Axios, Project 2025 has been briefing all of them. Trump, Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, even Robert Kennedy Jr. has gotten a run with Project 2025.
So by the way, Project 2025 is essentially the Heritage Foundation.
Yeah.
Like it's a bunch of groups, but it's led by the Heritage Foundation. Something important to keep in mind is that the Heritage Foundation, this is partly advertising for the Heritage Foundation, all of this.
Yeah.
And, for them, it's about maintaining their relevance in an environment where they used to be the king of the think tanks. And now they're in a much more competitive kind of environment. And because they've got this sense of being one of the legacy, like Reagan era think tanks, they always have to overcome this suspicion from the MAGA crowd. So it's about advertising from them. It's about keeping their support rolling in, and it's about keeping themselves front and center. So if you go to their website, they are bragging about the fact, the left is terrified of our plan to gut the civil service, and they should be. As I've said before, so many people have basically made careers out of promising stuff to Trump. And as Rick Perlstein noted in his classic essay, The Long Con, back in 2012, this is one of the endemic problems with the right, is that there are just so many people grifting each other all the time. And this could ultimately, on a large scale, just be another one of those grifts.
On that note, I have a Stats Nugget. Woo! Your least favourite Stats Nugget, Dave, about polling. I know you don't like the Stats Nuggets about polling, but I find this really interesting, and it's about democracy. So I thought I'd throw this in. This is from the New York Times. It's an experiment by Nate Cohen about voting for democracy.
Okay.
They put two hypotheticals to equivalent groups.
Yep.
Hypothetical A, would you be more likely to support a Democratic candidate who says Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy, or a Republican candidate who tried to overturn the 2020 election? Hypothetical B, would you be more likely to support a Democratic candidate who says Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy, or a Republican candidate who says we should move on from the 2020 election? The Republican who tried to overturn the 2020 election in Group A lost by 3 percentage points.
Right.
The move on Republican won by 15 points. An 18-point difference.
Yes.
Now, these are the classic, inverted commas, generic candidates, okay? I'm not saying that an 18-point difference is what you'll get in the real world with real people and all the rest of it. But it does show, I think, that, and it is very hypothetical, but I think it does show that how much more attractive someone who didn't try to overthrow an election is than someone who's got nothing to do with that.
Yeah. And I think also general appetite for something new. I I kind of feel that if you just put the question to everyone in America, like, okay, can we have an election with just two completely different people?
Yeah.
Right. We won't even tell you who they are. Can we have an election with just two completely different people? Yeah. I'm pretty sure that would win by a convincing margin. Now, it wouldn't be everyone because there are a lot of people who would, at least a third of the population would still want Trump. But there are a large number of people who want Trump mainly because they hate Biden so much or they hate the other side so much, but who would jettison him for someone else if they had if they had a chance. As far as support for Biden, that is purely because people are scared of the consequences of this late in the game. Changing a Democratic candidate. So I think we are really in this situation where I won't say nobody wants this race, but not many people actually want this race. I mean, we're also in a situation where not many people actually want this level of hate and polarization in American society either. So
it's exhausting.
Yes, yeah. I mean, this is not what people actually want, but circumstances mean that this is probably what we're going to get.
Yeah. I'll just note two things on that. Number one, recall 2022, how there were a surprisingly large number of January 6 types who lost. And and those people also doubled up with pro-life types as well.
Yes.
But we weren't sure if it was more abortion or more democracy.
Yep.
Maybe it was more democracy than we think.
Yeah.
And also, many Republican candidates would be the move-on candidate.
Yeah.
Trump is not going to allow himself to be that candidate.
No.
So that's the downside of Trump. He will not let you forget it.
Yes.
Even if it's in his interest to forget it.
Yes.
He will not let you forget. The other thing is they also did the same experiment with abortion. And the two options this time, the Democrat was the same again. Would you be more likely to support a Democrat candidate who supports a federal law ensuring access to abortion nationwide, or a Republican candidate who supports a federal ban on abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy? Not 6 weeks, 15 weeks of pregnancy. And then the hypothetical B is the Nikki Haley position, which is the same Democrat candidate or a Republican candidate who says abortion should be left to the states. Right? The Republican presidential candidate who supported the 15-week ban had a 1-point lead. The Republican who promised to leave abortion to the states had a 4-point lead. So there was 3 points difference, which is a lot less than 18 points difference. So I just throw that out there. Maybe democracy might be we talk about abortion a lot. Maybe democracy is the ace up the sleeve. In the election.
Well, and I think that there are reasons to believe that abortion might not be as powerful in this as it was in 2022 because, I mean, like Trump's going to try to distance himself from the issue as much as possible, whereas the 2022 election was happening as red states were sort of implementing these fairly draconian bans. I'm certainly not saying it's going away as an issue, but it might not have the power that it had in 20. But we will see. We'll have to see.
Okay. Another quick update. And by the way, so much has happened in the last week and a half, but I'm ignoring everything that happened from Friday because I know we've got another podcast coming soon.
That's right.
So this is like, just imagine this was Friday.
Yes, so you get another one in 2 days.
All right. I want to do an update on Biden, Missouri, because I didn't stick the landing. Probably because it's been so long since I wrote my notes, I completely forgot what I meant. This is not going to take long. But let me illustrate. I just want to illustrate the complexity of the case, which was my main point, by summarizing the many levels simultaneously existing. This won't take long, I promise you. First question. Was there an unambiguously illegal statement made by the government towards social media companies? I'd say the answer was a clear no. We went through them all. Clearly, there was nothing unambiguously illegal in itself. No one line we go, you can't say that to a social media company, right? There were maybe one or two that were borderline, but not unambiguously illegal, right? Second question, though, could the government's behavior overall be illegally pressuring social media companies to censor posts that they wouldn't otherwise be censoring, even if individual lines weren't a problem? As a whole, could it be? Now, I would say maybe. I think your position was no on that, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay. But the thing is, the thing that's whether your position is yes, no, or maybe, how do you define that judgment?
Right.
Which is what the court has to do. They have to put in black and white the tests that you would run.
That's right.
Which is very complicated to do.
Yes.
Third question. Rather than looking at the government's behavior, what if we look at it from the social media company's viewpoint? Did they act like they were bullied? Regardless of whether you think the conduct should lead to bullying, if they act like they're being bullied, then should the court intervene?
Yes.
And I would say that they once again maybe acted like they were bullied. It's just really grey, you know. How do you weigh up their actions versus what the government actually said or did? That's difficult, right? That's another grey area. Fourth question. Maybe the media companies wanted to be directed. There's no evidence that they didn't politically agree with the government's suggestions.
Yes.
Like they after all, they felt free to not follow some of the government's advice. So how can you determine legally what the social media companies' desires were?
Yes.
That's a really hard thing to work out.
Yeah.
Once again, really grey, hard to have black and white rules. And good luck to the Supreme Court sorting all that out because it's just so murky for mine.
Yes.
And social media companies are so important right now, right? And so you can't have the government controlling what kind of legal speech is allowed on them. But at the same time, you've got to draw some very clear lines. And so that's why I think this case is A, so important, and B, so devilishly hard to work out. That's the point I was trying to make last week, which I don't think I made well.
Okay.
So there you go.
So if you'd forgotten about Biden, Missouri, we're not going to let you forget about it.
No, I'm sure I have updates every week from now on.
Yes.
But anyway, yes. Okay, so another update, which we had to make, the 14th Amendment. The Colorado court.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to talk to that or do you want me to talk to that?
So the Colorado court has found that Donald Trump did engage in an insurrection.
Yes.
But that he wasn't a federal officer.
Yes. We did foreshadow that, didn't we?
We did foreshadow that.
Yes.
Yeah. So as we keep emphasising, as odd as this seems,
yes.
This is we've always said that there are basically three components of this. So insurrection is one of them.
Yep.
Is Trump a federal officer is the other one.
Yep.
Third one is the one that I always forget.
I've forgotten to.
Okay, there is a third thing, but all that you need to know about for the Colorado case is these two things.
Yep.
And now I'm not saying that every court would find that he engaged in an insurrection, but the fact that one has now found that he is not a federal officer, I think that at the very least foreshadows how the Supreme Court would see it.
I'll tell you what's interesting about this, because it's not just that they found the right was an insurrection. They also said that Trump acted with the specific intent to incite political violence and direct it at the Capitol with the purpose of disrupting the electoral certification.
Yes.
So that's the whole kit and caboodle right there. And they said that Trump cultivated a culture that embraced political violence through his consistent endorsement of the same. Okay, so on the factual basis, they have found basically he's guilty on a factual basis.
Yeah.
It's only on a legal basis
That's right.
that they say he's not guilty. And just to explain just very quickly, I'm not going to do the whole argument again. I'm actually going to put in the blurb on YouTube and on Facebook, and in fact on the audio podcast as well. If you look in the blurb, you'll see I'll put the link to the Mike McCasey piece. He's the Bush Attorney General who first put forth this argument that I saw, and it's a very good summary of the arguments of this piece, of this argument. If you feel like it's such a ridiculous argument, read the piece. So we'll explain it to you. It's from the Wall Street Journal. Essentially, Section 14, Part 3 applies to, quote, who having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States shall have engaged in an insurrection or rebellion, etc. The president obviously hasn't taken an oath of office as a member of Congress or as a member of a state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state. So the only one left is officer of the United States. So if he's not an officer of the United States, then 14.3 doesn't apply to him. And Mike McCasey makes the argument that the courts in the past have held that the officer of the United States term does not apply to the president. In 1888, there was a case that did that. And importantly, in 2010, there was a case that did this involving John Roberts.
Yes.
But you can read the argument as you like. But the important thing here is, on the facts,
yes,
the court said he was guilty.
Yes.
On the law, they said he wasn't.
That's right.
You can't appeal facts.
No.
You can appeal law.
Yes.
So what that means is they get another bite with the next court up.
Yeah.
Right? And that next court cannot overturn the finding of an insurrection.
Yes.
Because that's facts.
Yes.
All right. So they can, and if it doesn't work on that court, they can appeal again. What I'm saying is this is going to the Supreme Court.
It definitely is going to the
The Supreme Court might not accept it.
No.
But
almost certainly.
but it is going to be presented to the Supreme Court as an option.
Yes.
And then the Supreme Court will either ignore it or they will rule on the officer of the United States legal fiction or otherwise.
Yes.
So this is the first time when I've seen a case and I go, oh shit, this is actually happening now.
Yeah.
So it's
happening.
So I just want to flag it for that reason. Okay. So that's the important thing on that. All right. So let's get into. I've got a lot to say about Israel. I'm not going to do the whole Israel thing because there's just too much. But I want you to talk for a while before I get to that. So why don't you start with Kissinger?
Okay.
Yeah.
So hard for me to say much more about Kissinger than everything that you already will have heard since he died at the age of 100. But I am going to say a few things. One was that his importance in the US-China relationship was very, very important. And that's not just because he paved the way for Nixon's visit. He was the first one to make that clandestine visit in 1971. And it really seems to have been his idea, although would have been in line with Nixon's instincts as well, that the Soviet Union was the real threat. The Soviet Union could be balanced with this other major communist power. Now, China and the Soviet Union had a falling out with each other in the mid-1950s. But it was still very, it was still a genuinely creative piece of diplomacy to change American recognition of Beijing as the legitimate government of China as opposed to Taiwan. And that really did actually change geopolitics quite significantly. One thing that is worth keeping in mind, and I don't think this gets emphasized enough when, people say, oh, presidents kept going to Kissinger for advice. What they actually kept going to him for was his contacts with China. Even when Trump went to Kissinger and had one of the most awkward photo sessions ever, the reason why he went to him was because he needed Kissinger's contacts in China. When Kissinger died, Chinese state media referred to him as an old friend of China, which is, on the one hand, extraordinarily literally true, given that he was 100 years old and had visited there when he was 100 years old. But on the other hand, I think that's basically the highest honorific that the Chinese state media would give to a foreigner. So they regarded him as the most important American figure in that entire relationship. And I think when we have a look at ways, the impact that Kissinger had, I think that's where he has the biggest impact. I'm quite sympathetic to arguments that say in a lot of other respects, his importance was actually overrated. And part of that was because he was a supreme self-myth maker in many, many ways. He loved to position himself as this academic thinker, this scholar who had managed to get into this position of power and influence. The reality is it's almost like it was the other way around. He was basically a diplomatic practitioner who somehow managed to get into academia. He was not actually a first-tier thinker in international relations. He's often credited as a realist. He wasn't actually a particularly consistent realist if you compare him to genuine realists like Hans Morgenthau of his generation or later people like John Mearsheimer. And as much as he liked to present this picture of himself as having this very unvarnished view of, values have no place in international relations, it's really a game of skill and power, the fact is he actually had some incredibly strong moral commitments. And the major moral commitment was this. He believed that American power was a good thing in the world, and he was prepared to justify any use of it. It's worth noting Kissinger approved of basically every war that the United States fought from Vietnam onwards. That is not a position that a genuine realist would take. Kissinger approved of the Iraq War. Right, that's not a position a genuine realist would take. That's far more indicative of the fact that Kissinger always managed to agree with whoever was in power at the time, which was another, part of his myth of vaunted influence, was this sort of congruence between him and all of these presidencies. That was partly because of the way that Kissinger himself adapted, rather than, people necessarily adopting Kissinger's point of view about everything. When you read his thinking on international relations, and there's a lot of it out there because he was an incredibly prolific writer, if not a great one, but the book that probably is the one that's cited the most as encapsulating his views was Diplomacy, written in 1994.
Does it go on the list?
No, it doesn't. I had to read this.
Kissinger.
I had to read this in a seminar in graduate school, and it was one of the books that I read in a seminar in graduate school where you get all the way through it. And then right at the end, the professor says, "Oh yeah, this isn't very good, but it just gets talked about a lot, so we need to, we need to talk about it." And he, it's a reasonably good. If it's a book that manages to be very long and kind of lightweight at the same time. It starts with this rather bombastic thing that the hinge in American foreign policy was between Theodore Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson, and Theodore Roosevelt was the true statesman. He was someone who had this very realistic view of America's role in the world. He's the one that says we don't go abroad looking for monsters to slay. Says was Woodrow Wilson wanted to remake the world in his own idealistic image. And for Kissinger, that was the problem with American foreign policy ever since. It was that Americans were too idealistic, too moralistic, blah, blah. It's an incredibly self-serving argument. And it also overlooks the fact that Theodore Roosevelt was incredibly active in the world in some pretty idealistic ways. It was actually under Theodore Roosevelt's presidency, that was the time that America actually most resembled an imperial power. That was when it had a lot of overseas land possessions. So Kissinger, he was overrated as an international relations thinker. In many ways, his influence was somewhat overrated. It's also been pointed out a lot of the things that he did were things that had been done before. This is why, though, I emphasise the China point. That was actually something that hadn't been done before, that actually was against the grain of what the US was doing at the time. But of course, we can't talk about Kissinger without talking about his complete indifference to mass killing in the third world. And this is a legacy that he can't escape from. So he was very single-mindedly anti-communist, and he was obsessed with the idea that you couldn't let communism or anything resembling it, anything that might turn communist, prevail in any part of the world, especially not in the third world. And when I say the third world here, I'm not using that as a catch-all term for poor countries. I mean that in its original meaning of this was the non-aligned bloc, led by India and Yugoslavia and some other countries, the ones who didn't want to be part of either the Soviet bloc or the American bloc. Now, what would happen was anytime there was some hint of socialism in that part of the world, Kissinger was fully behind any effort to suppress it as brutally as possible. So he gave the green light to Suharto's invasion of Indonesia because East Timor was in danger of going socialist. That was a genocidal invasion. Back in 1971, when Pakistan's regime was pursuing what is now widely recognised as genocide in East Pakistan, or what's now Bangladesh, Kissinger overlooked that because Pakistan was his major conduit to China at the time. He actively supported Pinochet's coup in Chile and said, oh, look, in the Eisenhower administration, we would have been heroes for supporting this, for overthrowing a socialist government. From South Africa to Argentina to the Philippines, he supported all of these brutal right-wing dictatorships because of the fact that they were reliably anti-communist, and he didn't care how many people they killed in the process. He also didn't care how many people he killed himself. He actually was very hands-on in the covert bombing of Cambodia. which was a bombing campaign that not only killed tens of thousands of civilians and devastated the country so much that it paved the way for Pol Pot, it didn't even improve the American strategic position in Indochina. So even though Kissinger got the Nobel, or was the co-recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1973 for bringing an end to the Vietnam War, it was widely pointed out at the time that the United States could have got exactly the same terms years earlier. That bombing campaign in Cambodia and the bombing campaign that took place in Vietnam at the same time, which wasn't secret, that did not get the US anything at all strategically. It just killed a lot of people. So, yeah, there's a reason why so many people were, let's just say not mourning Kissinger very much when he died.
On that note, I've said a number of times now on the air that I'm no historian. I knew very little about Kissinger before he died. I've done a bit of reading since.
Yes.
Oh, and by the way, if you want to read an absolute perler of sort of anti-obituary of Kissinger, Spencer Ackerman went to town on him for Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
I'll put that in the blurb. Rolling Stone has a paywall, but if you go incognito, you'll be able to read it. So that's in the blurb if you want to read it. But I was going to say that from the little I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert on him now. I'm not going to be one of those people.
Yeah.
But I have read a couple of interesting articles.
Yes, yeah.
And one of the things I read, which I found interesting, was that it's not even, I could kind of understand in the context of the Cold War, people being obsessed about, Montenegro must never go communist. I can understand a bit of that, even though in hindsight it looks stupid.
Yes, yeah.
What I don't understand, though, is that even when it wasn't about victories for the Soviet Union of concrete countries, he even was prepared to sacrifice peace and lives for just moral victories. Like what I was reading about was in particular in the context of Israel, that he single-handedly destroyed a number of opportunities for peace in the Middle East. Just to stop, but because they were proposed by Russia. And Russia wasn't going to get anything out of it. It wasn't for some strategic advantage. It was just, Russia can't have the moral victory of proposing the peace in a successful peace in the Middle East. And you just go, wow, looking back on that now, what the fuck? It's so I found that amazing as well. It's another thing which I found weird, which I had no idea about, was his whole mythology. Like, I had no idea that he was such a celebrity. Like John was talking about.
Yes, he was,
It was talking about like him being on the cover of Newsweek dressed as Superman, and I went and looked for it, and I found it. I'll put it up there so you can see. I just couldn't believe it. It's like, can you possibly imagine someone today in his position dressed like that? On the cover of a newspaper.
Blinken.
Yeah, Blinken.
Jake
like
Sullivan.
That. Or just some foreign policy nerd, like Thomas Friedman. Like dressed as Superman. Like what the hell? And like in the fact he was dating all these supermodels. Like Murphy Brown.
He liked the appearance that he was dating supermodels.
But they let him. These supermodels let him. He was like warmongering Leonardo DiCaprio. He was coming out with people 30 years younger than him. What's going on? I find the whole thing.
No, he was a master of self-mythology. And I mean, that's one of the things that made him an effective diplomat. And his mastery of interpersonal contact with people, like the number of people who are pouring out these obituaries to him, it's a testimony to his interpersonal charisma. And that is what made him an effective, as much as I disagree with most of what he did, he was certainly a very effective practitioner of diplomacy in that respect. So I mean, certainly very very significant figure. Yes.
You got anything else to say about Kissinger?
There was a lot of criticism of Kissinger before he died. Okay, so he hadn't been heard about so much in recent years, but I just want to make the point, like, he was hugely criticised for nearly the whole time that he was a public figure. And you might remember the 2016 debate where Hillary Clinton had referred to Henry Kissinger as a friend in a book.
That's right. Yes.
And Sanders said, well, "I'm proud he's not my friend. He's the most destructive Secretary of State in history." I think Obama was one of the few presidents who actually had something critical to say about him while he was still alive. The kind of classic takedown of him was Christopher Hitchens' book, The Trial of Henry Kissinger.
Yeah.
I'm not actually putting that in the book list, though, because Hitchens was basically the master of the 5,000-word essay. Anything longer than that, it gets very repetitive, and like you start to notice how large the print is and stuff like. So it's not. He didn't really write books, Hitchens. So that one doesn't go.
I love your world
in the book list.
where 5,000-word essays are like comic books for you.
Hitchens, once again, Hitchens is, especially towards the end of his career, someone I disagree with most of the time, but absolute master of about the 5,000, the 3 to 5,000 word essay form.
Sure. Okay, let's get into Gaza then. Just jump in whenever you want.
Okay.
I am going to be drawing a line at the ceasefire.
Yep.
Because plenty has happened since then. The humanitarian pause.
Yes.
But there's been some things I've been hoarding for a while,
Okay.
which I just want to get out there because they're getting older and older.
Yes,
but I think they're important to cover.
Yep.
Okay, so first of all, just basic status. We've had more than 15,000 Palestinians killed according to Gaza Health Ministry, 1.9 million people internally displaced, at least 53 journalists reportedly killed in Israeli strikes, more than 100 United Nations officials killed. Okay, so they're your basic stats. But I want to talk about polling for a second, because this is an interesting area. First, to start with America. Gallup is the same as has been all along, 32% supporting Biden's handling of Israel, 60% of Dems, 16% of Republicans. Marist have 38% of Americans saying Israel's military response has been too much, 17% saying too little, 38% saying it's about right. So 55% are still on Israel's side of that particular argument against Biden, as it turns out at the moment. 38% saying too much. The 38% who are saying it's too much is up from 26% in mid-October. The 17% saying it's too little is down from 27% in mid-October. And the 38% saying about right is down from 44%.
Yep.
So it was 71% who are on Israel's side of the conflict as far as the amount of attack goes.
Yes.
And that's gone down to 55%.
Yep.
That's not a big surprise.
No.
Overall, 61% are more likely to sympathise with Israelis compared to 30% sympathising with Palestinians. That's 79% Republicans sympathising with Israelis, 67% of independents. Democrats are 45-45. That's in Marist in November.
Yeah.
Okay? That's not the poll. I just put it out there just so you know, but that's not the poll I'm interested in. The polling I'm interested in, which doesn't get talked about, is the Palestinian polling. And I have some very interesting polls there.
Yes.
Okay, one that's gotten talked about a little bit is ORAD, which is the Arab World for Research and Development. That's got a little bit of coverage. That was taking samples from October 31 to November 7, so in the middle of the war.
Yes.
I don't know how you poll people in the middle of the war, but I imagine the war might affect their state of mind.
Yeah.
All right, so just to put that out there.
Yeah. But, I got to say, polling can be done under almost any circumstances. People do it.
Well, it turns out they have. 668 Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Obviously, that's not a huge number, but under the conditions, you can understand.
There are polls conducted in Australia all the time with samples smaller than that.
I know. I'm just saying that you're Mr. Sample Size, so I'm just acknowledging that.
Heroic effort.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So obviously there's methodological issues. It's tough polling, but they've done it. 75% support the 7th of October massacre.
Wow.
59.3% describe themselves as having extreme support for the 7th of October massacre. That is obviously depressing for me because it's not about me, but just but I'm very keen to distinguish between Hamas and Palestinians, right? And this is the kind of thing that gets waved around by the people who are trying to conflate them.
I would still say you can distinguish between Hamas and the Palestinians.
Oh, I don't know.
Despite that support.
We're going somewhere.
Yes, okay,
we're going somewhere. 76% have a positive view of Hamas. 84% have a positive view of Islamic Jihad. which might give you some indication of what might happen if there was an election now, that if Hamas wasn't elected and it was like Jihad might. 97% view Israel very negatively. 97% view the US very negatively. 64% have a negative view of Iran, which is worth noting. 77% support a one-state solution where the state is Palestine. Two-state solution gets 17% support, which is obviously also depressing for people who want an end to this. Now, that is the poll that gets thrown around a lot. I'll tell you the poll, which I've only seen mentioned once.
What's that?
The poll, which was out on October 6th. Yeah.
Okay.
This is an Arab Barometer poll.
Yeah, Arab Barometer is a very good,
very respected pollster. Everything I've read about Arab Barometer generally has been extremely respected. They polled between September 28 and October 8, but the polling finished in Gaza on October 6. That's as good as you're going to get without it being affected by the war. Okay. Still relatively small samples, although bigger, 790 respondents in the West Bank and 399 in Gaza. So that's pretty good. Okay. Now, we're talking about distinguishing between Palestinians and Hamas. 67% of Gaza reported having no trust at all for Hamas. Sorry. I did that wrong. 44% said no trust at all. 23% said not a lot of trust. So it's those two combined as 67% in Hamas. Only 29% of Gazans expressed either a great deal or quite a lot of trust in Hamas. 29%. Compared to the 76% who had a positive view of Hamas during the war. So you can see the effect the war has. Right? Just 27% of Gazans selected Hamas as their preferred party, which was down from 34% in 2021. 30% of Gazans favoured Fatah, which is the rival in the West Bank. Right? 7% supported Palestinian Jihad, and the rest supported no one. 33% of Gazan adults under 30 supported Hamas. 23% of those 30 and older supported Hamas. There's a bit of a generation gap there. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. They basically think Hamas is a terrible government. 78% said the availability of food was a moderate or severe problem in Gaza. 5% said it wasn't a problem. The availability of food. 75% reported moderate to severe difficulty affording food even when it was available. 6% said food affordability was not a problem. 31% identified government mismanagement as the primary cause of food insecurity in Gaza. 26% blamed inflation. The number that blamed economic sanctions, 16%.
Wow.
They did not blame Israel. They blamed Hamas before the war. But having said that, they don't have a lot of faith in the Palestinian Authority either.
No.
When asked how they would vote if presidential elections were held in Gaza between Ismail Haniyeh, who's the leader of Hamas, Mahmoud Abbas, the leader of the Palestinian Authority, and
at least as old as Henry Kissinger.
And Marwan Barghouti, an imprisoned member of the Central Committee of Fatah, 24% chose Haniyeh. Barghouti got 32%. Abbas got 12%. So no faith in Abbas at all. Right? Now, Barghouti, you might go, who is this Barghouti character? Should we have some faith in Barghouti? Westerners sometimes refer to him as Nelson Mandela, potentially, of the Palestinians. Palestinians never refer to him as that. Barghouti once supported the peace process. He became disillusioned. He's considered the leader of the first and the second Intifada. And he's in jail for murder at the moment. I'm not sure either America or Israel would love him as a potential leader.
Doesn't sound like part of the plan.
I don't know a lot about Barghouti, I must admit, other than what I read in a few articles. But that's who that's all I know at this point. I don't want to weigh in on someone I don't know much about. But that's him. 30%, worryingly, said they wouldn't even participate in that presidential election because they just go, not interested in any of these guys. Is that the leader? That's almost the leader. Barghouti got 32%, then 30% saying screw them all. Now, another more evidence they had no faith in the PA. 52% of Gazans believe the Palestinian Authority is a burden on the Palestinian people. 67% would like to see Abbas resign.
Yeah.
And here's an interesting one. Presented with 3 possible solutions to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and other, two-state solution as per 1993 Oslo Accords, borders before the 1967 Six-Day War, was one option.
Yep.
Another option was an Israeli-Palestinian confederation in which both states are independent but remain deeply linked and permit the free movement of citizens. Third option is a single state for both Jews and Arabs.
Yes.
54% chose the two-state solution.
Wow.
That's the day.
That's higher than I would have expected.
Yeah, that's the day before the war. And given Israel, and we're going to get to this, Israel have not been treating them well recently.
No.
Still, 54% favoured the two-state solution.
Yes, yeah.
10% favoured the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, 9% favoured single state.
Yes, yeah.
Compared to 77% during the war who favoured the single state of Palestine.
Yes, yeah.
So once again, that's the effect the war has.
Yeah, yeah.
73% of Gazans favoured a peaceful settlement to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. 20% of Gazans favoured a military solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Yeah.
The 77% of that 20%, the 20% who favoured the military solution, 77% of those were supporters of Hamas, which is 15% of the adult population.
Yeah.
Not much. Compared to the 75% who supported the 7th of October attack during the war.
Yeah.
Compare that.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is you're going to see a lot of polls out there about angry Palestinians going, let's just carve the hell out of these guys.
I was going to say,
but 6th of October polls, I think, is the most important one.
Yes.
Palestinians are not necessarily Hamas fans. No. At least they don't have to be.
No.
If you don't make them that way.
Yeah.
Anyway, what are you going to say?
That wartime polling, it's exactly what you'd expect. In a war, the impetus is to say, I support my side. That's all of those questions, that's basically what they were saying. I support my side. That immediate pre-war polling, I think, does give more of an idea of what the political possibilities actually were. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if 2 days after the war they revert, or if it's 10 years, or if it's never. I don't know. I'm just saying what it was like.
Yes.
On the 6th of October.
Yep.
Where this becomes an American issue is just last week, Marco Rubio was pushing for Hamas supporters in America who answers as citizens to have their visas revoked. We have talked about this before. He has a bill, the Safeguarding Americans from Extremism Act, which would require the Department of Homeland Security to refrain from issuing visas or granting refugee asylum or temporary protected status to anyone holding a passport issued by the Palestinian Authority. At the same time as that, Dick Durbin, Premier Jayapal and Jan Schakowsky, all Democrats, are circulating a letter to Biden encouraging him to designate Palestinian territories for temporary protection status, thus allowing foreign nationals from those areas to stay in the US. That presumably would be the right thing to do for people who need to take refuge.
Yes.
But if that goes ahead, get ready for some serious hyperventilating.
Of course,
those two movements are going to clash.
Yes.
So that could well be the next scare campaign.
Yeah.
So I just want to flag that there. Remember those polls when that debate goes ahead. Okay, so that's the polling. Do you want to say anything about any of that? Okay. Now, this is going to sound ancient, but I really do need to talk about the hospitals, about Al-Shifa in particular.
Yeah.
Now, as of mid-November, Gaza's health ministry says just 10 of the region's 35 hospitals are still operational, for what that's worth. 0 of them can perform surgery. The remaining few hospitals in southern Gaza are short on supplies, critical infrastructure. They're essentially operating like community clinics rather than hospitals, right? So they're providing the basics. About 70% of primary care clinics are shut as well. 192 medical personnel are allegedly amongst the dead. They're the latest figures from Gazan Health Ministry. Okay, so obviously a normal attack on a hospital will be a violation of international law. We've heard all this to death. There's an exception if there's evidence that the medical facilities are being weaponized to harm an opposing force. That's exactly what Israel is saying is happening. They're saying Hamas are hiding there. Then they attack after they've warned people repeated times to leave the hospital. The problem, of course, is that some patients simply can't be moved. You can warn them as much as you like. They're in a hospital. They might not be able to move. So there's been an ongoing propaganda war where Israel is trying to prove that Hamas are hiding in hospitals, and Israel are warning the patients to leave, and Hamas are trying to prove the opposite. Okay. So there have been some moments of obvious untruths, like in Rantisi, I don't know how to pronounce it, Rantisi Hospital, Daniel Hagari, who's the Where's Wally of the IDF spokespeople, he just pops up absolutely everywhere. You might have seen this clip.
This is a guarding list. Every terrorist has his own shift.
In this room, he says, a guard list that begins October 7th, ends November 3rd, not long before the hospital was evacuated.
Okay, so he's saying that's a guards list of people who have been there. Arab speakers online immediately pointed out that the document was simply a list of dates and days of the week since October 7. There were no names or guards. Israel admitted a translation error there. They corrected the video, but that kind of thing doesn't build trust, right? Okay, but the main game is obviously Al-Shifa Hospital, which was the big hospital. Okay, it's no longer functioning as a hospital, I should add, but there are still patients there. The IDF have said since early in the war that Al-Shifa was the focus of Hamas's activity in the Gaza Strip. They said, quote, it was an elaborate Hamas command and control center under the territory's largest healthcare facility. Okay, an elaborate Hamas command and control center. They said the site had several underground complexes used by leaders, including a control center for Hamas's internal security unit and a headquarters to direct rocket fire, command forces, and store weapons. They aired this video right here of a computer simulation with what I would call a Bond villain lair beneath. America also said that they felt that Hamas was under the hospital as well. CNN said a US official with knowledge of American intelligence says Hamas has a command node under the Al-Shifa hospital which uses fuel intended for the hospital, and Hamas fighters regularly cluster in and around Gaza's largest hospital. But were they right? The reason I think it's so important to cover is because we're about to go through this again. I'm only foreshadowing what we'll be talking about in future weeks.
Yep.
But I think it's important to cover what's happened before we begin round two. Okay, so some background on Al-Shifa. Even back in 2014, there were a number of news articles where reporters met Hamas people in that hospital. The Washington Post, for instance, had an article by William Booth, which wrote the hospital, quote, has become a de facto headquarters for Hamas leaders who can be seen in the hallways and offices. That was in 2014. In 2014, Amnesty International said that Hamas had used parts of Al-Shifa to, quote, detain, interrogate, torture, and otherwise ill-treat suspects. That's Amnesty International. In 2006, there was a PBS doco showing Hamas gunmen roaming the halls of Al-Shifa as well. They had a protected area the cameras couldn't go. The IDF knew that at least something was under the hospital because they built a bunker and tunnels there in 1983. The underground infrastructure was part of a modernisation and expansion effort at Al-Shifa commissioned by Israel's Public Works Department. According to Haaretz, there was a large cement basement there that housed a laundry and various administrative services. Tablet magazine described at the time the space as, quote, a secure underground operating room and tunnel network. Now, the part that didn't get that didn't get publicised so much, all that stuff, until quite recently, and you could see that by Christine Amanpour having no idea when ex-Prime Minister Ehud Barak told her about it on air.
Yes.
Can I just start by asking you what is your view of whether your government, your military, has done a good enough job of proving their claim that there was a major command center and bunker under Al-Shifa?
It's already known for many years that they have in the bunkers that originally was built by Israeli constructors underneath Shifa were used as a command post of the Hamas and a kind of a junction of several tunnels, part of the system. I don't know to say to what extent it is a major. It's probably not the only kind of command post. Several others are under other hospitals or in other sensitive places, but it's for sure had been used by Hamas even during this conflict.
Well, when you say it was built by Israeli engineers, did you misspeak?
No, decades ago we were running the place. So we held them. It was many decades ago, probably 4 decades ago, that we helped them to build these bunkers in order to enable more space for the operation of the hospital within the very limited size of this compound.
Okay. All right. Well, that's sort of thrown me a little bit.
Ehud, looking good, no longer in jail.
Great use of Just for Men there, Ehud Barak. Anyway, Israeli officials said that in 2007, Hamas did enlarge the basements, but they were there.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's talk about testimony. A Norwegian doctor who currently works there says this whole thing is bullshit. I'll play you what he has to say.
We have heard these claims since 2009. Now, I have been working in Shifa for 16 years on and off, in very hectic periods. I've been able to walk freely around. I take lots of pictures, I video film. I've been sleeping in the hospital during bombardment. I've been all over. I've never been restricted, controlled. Nobody has ever controlled my picture and documentation material. If it was a military command center, I would not work there.
First of all, we should note he still works there.
Yeah.
And we do have to acknowledge that,
yeah.
okay, because that might be affecting what he's saying. Secondly, he seems like a no shit kind of a guy.
Yes.
Thirdly, he seems to have a phone from 1974.
Yes.
and he's so no shit he doesn't turn it off during interviews. But anyway, that's I feel convincing testimony.
Yes.
There's plenty of convincing testimony on the other side as well. A British doctor who worked there 3 years ago, doesn't work there now, has had this to say.
And he reminded me of his experiences in Shifa, and I decided that I would record some of what he said because it is interesting to hear a perspective of an outsider and one who is safe enough to speak.
The main point was when I was first asked to work there, I was told there was a part of the hospital I was not to go near, and if I did, I'd be in danger of being shot.
Shot? You mean actually shot with a gun?
Yes.
Was it explained to you why that was?
No, but implicit was that it was being used for non-medical purposes.
And did you see anything non-medical, or did you obey the instructions and stay away?
I stayed away, but I saw a few sort of dodgy-looking non-medical characters going in and out all the time. It was a ward leading to a basement. As I say, I didn't go there, so I behaved myself.
They would say there could be many other reasons that you would be told not to go to a particular area of a hospital. It's not unusual.
Well, I was welcome everywhere else, and as I say, the doctors and nurses there were very welcoming and very kind. And the hushed tones under which this was said was consistent with all the other hushed tones about which Hamas was discussed. You know, people were genuinely fearful. I cannot emphasise too much the air of collective paranoia that existed there.
He did go on to say that if they were 10% frightened of a possible Israeli airstrike, they were 90% frightened of getting onto the wrong side of Hamas. He really did describe an atmosphere of fear.
So I also find that testimony convincing. The IDF released a video of a terrorist interrogation where they were saying that they were in Shifa hospital and there were about 50,000 people who sought refuge. The interrogatee said, I was there inside the hospital and I know the doctors there. The doctors were furious because Hamas operatives and operatives of other terrorist organizations were inside the hospital. He said he saw up to 100 other terrorists in the hospital. They dressed as nursing staff, but they were not nurses or doctors. Nurses or doctors. Now, my personal view is I would ignore that because Israel do torture prisoners. And we have no idea whether that was elicited out of torture or not.
Yes.
So I'm much more interested in what the doctors have to say than what the prisoner has to say. But I just threw it out there because it's been released. So I want you to have the full information. Okay, so there was they then had their operations. That's the background. They didn't have the operation in Shifa. In the end, they only killed the Israeli forces killed at least five Hamas militants, or terrorists, whatever you want to call them, with the targeted operation. No IDF soldiers were hurt, and apparently there was little to no friction between the IDF and hospital staff and patients. which raises questions why that can't be the standard every time they enter a hospital. I would say. But anyway, okay, what did they find? They found weapons caches, explosive combat gear, and the signs of a Hamas area of some kind hidden within the hospital to use Gazan civilians as human shields, they say. They told the BBC that items recovered included photos and videos of the hostages and handwritten notes. We uncovered a lot of computers and other equipment which could really shed light on the current situation, hopefully regaining hostages as well, said Conricus. Now, we haven't seen a lot of that.
No.
What we have seen is we've seen a video of an apparent MRI centre where there were a grab bag of guns, grenades, ammunition, and uniforms behind the MRI machine. If you turned on an MRI machine with that stuff around, it would explode. So if they released video of that, we don't know what state it was when they got there, but I'm just saying we have video of that.
Right.
Okay. You can make what you like of that. They took some journalists in to see some areas for themselves. At different times, there were different numbers of guns when different journos went through, and there was a lot of controversy about that. I don't know why, because that's easy to explain.
Yeah.
They're obviously sorting through this stuff as they go. Okay, so then we got the footage. First of all, we got this footage here of showing the tunnels, which was here. You can see our old friend, what's his name? I already forgotten. Hagari, who turns up everywhere. Hagari walking through the tunnels under Shifa.
I want to show you more rooms. More rooms. This is a room, where you can sleep, eat, make command control. It also has an air conditioning. This air conditioning goes above the hospital. One of the reasons that allows us to understand this complex is that we found the engine of the air conditioner, of course, outside, next to the Qatari compound, inside the hospital, full electricity. The gear that was inside here was evacuated before we entered, but look at the ceiling. This is not just a regular tunnel. This is a high facility compound. Also, more toilets here.
He's showing rooms, he's showing bathrooms, he's showing kitchens. It looks military-esque, but it doesn't look like a command and control center. Well, I shouldn't say that. You decide for yourself. Hagari said this on Fox News.
What we're getting now is the network of the tunnels. We got a command and control system room in a tunnel 100 meters from the hospital to the north, underneath a school. It's booby-trapped. We're going to open it. We're going to collect it. We're going to demolish it.
Okay, so now the command and control center is 100 meters away under a school, not under the hospital. I mean, look, I'm not saying there's anything malicious about that, but it's just things you have to note.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, now, but there's also, so we know there's tunnels, but we knew there were tunnels already.
Yes.
There are rooms, we knew there were rooms already. But they are there. They're at least been confirmed that they are there. The most convincing evidence for me, though, is this. They also released some surveillance footage from October 7 from Shifa Hospital, which I will show you now. You can see an injured... I'll just play what he has to say.
I will now share concrete evidence of hostages. One from Nepal, one from Thailand, taken from Israel during the Hamas massacre on October 7th. I will now share this video that shows the same hostage entering into the hospital with a gunman, terrorist, inside the hospital. This is the main entrance of the hospital. This is at 10:55 a.m. They're entering another hostage gunmen are entering another hostage from those countries I mentioned into the vicinity. The terrorists are guarding the room. We have not yet located both of these hostages and rescued them.
The last guy, the injured guy, was identified as a hostage by his mate, so we know he was a hostage.
Yes.
He does look injured though. You might say he was being cleaned up, but Al-Shifa is on the other side of Gaza from where he was captured.
Yep.
And there were many hospitals they had to pass on the way. So it is a little bit suspicious that they take him to this hospital rather than some of the other hospitals. What's much more suspicious is the first guy, who clearly is not injured, who is struggling to get out of the way, doesn't want to be there.
Yes.
It's very, very easy to believe that that is a legitimate hostage who is being captured and taken to Al-Shifa for storage in some capacity. And I would say that of all the evidence I've seen is the most convincing piece of evidence that this was used in a military capacity.
Yes.
So I'll show you that clip a few times. So because that to me is the actual best evidence. So the rest you can go, well, maybe, maybe not, maybe not. The Hamas response to all this confirms that the hospitals of the Ministry of Health provide their medical services to everyone who deserves them, regardless of their gender and race. We have released images of all that, and the army spokesman is acting as if he's discovered something incredible. That's their take on it. Now, to be fair, Hamas has had weeks to cover their tracks since they knew Israel was going to go in. Yes. And Israel has made that point as well. Also, a command and control node or headquarters is unlikely to resemble what we consider a command and control node. Although Israel, the IDF were part of the problem there because they're the ones who released that stupid video.
Yes.
So they built their own expectations, right? So anyway, it seems to me like there was something there, but it also seems to me like Israel are probably over-egging it a little bit. I don't know. Yeah. You make your own call on this.
Yes, yeah.
But I just want to go through all of this because, like I said, that was part one. As soon as they got there, and as soon as they said, well, what we said was there is kind of there, but maybe it's under the school.
Yes.
They started talking about somewhere else. They started talking about Khan Yunis. And they said, actually, the group's leadership's gone to Khan Yunis, not here. And Ehud Olmert, the ex-prime minister, was saying, Khan Yunis is the real headquarters of Hamas. That's a quote. And now they're bombing Khan Yunis, which we'll get to in the next podcast. So this cycle can go on forever, but that is where we're at. What are your thoughts about all that?
Look, I think you've done a great service by putting all the evidence that you can out there. I think, unfortunately, in wartime situations, often it takes a very long time for the truth to come out and for all the evidence to come out. And I think that's the situation that we're in at the moment. And it's always dangerous to rush to any kind of judgment in a situation like this. That's all I would say. Fair
enough. Well, all I would add on this particular topic before we get to the other topic is that there's a lot of talk about human shields, about, oh my God, these Hamas animals using human shields. They're like the hospitals and using refugee camps as human shields. While I was reading about this stuff, I found something really interesting. It was a B'Tselem, but I don't know how to pronounce the name of the human rights organization in Israel. But B'Tselem, I think. B'Tselem, I'm going to call them, but I don't know how to pronounce it. I found a 2017 report about Israelis using human shields. Since 1967, this is what B'Tselem says, Israeli security forces have repeatedly used Palestinians in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip as human shields, ordering them to perform military tasks that risk their lives. Soldiers have ordered Palestinian civilians to remove suspicious objects from roads, to stand in front of soldiers while the latter shoot from behind them, and more. The Palestinian civilians were chosen at random for these tasks and could not refuse the demand placed on them by armed soldiers. And the decision to do that was made by senior military authorities. In 2002, as recently as 2002, in Operation Defensive Shield, that was explicit open military policy to do that. Then there was a big court case in 2002 about this, and the IDF, in the middle of the court case, announced that they wouldn't do it anymore.
Right.
Which was probably a good idea.
Yes.
But it kept happening. In Operation Cast Lead, that happened in 2008, B'Tselem found out about a few incidents, tried to take them to court. The vast majority of those reports were never fully investigated, and those that did resulted in no further action. Soldiers were being prosecuted in one case only, when a 9-year-old boy was ordered at gunpoint to open a bag they suspected was booby-trapped. The soldiers were given a 3-month conditional sentence and demoted from staff sergeant to private. That 2 years after the incident took place. None of their commanding officers were tried. And there have been reports in 2014 of the same kind of thing, but unconfirmed.
Yeah.
Now, that's not me saying Hamas should be excused. That's not me saying, what about? That's me saying everything involved in Israel-Palestinian disputes becomes vexed.
Yes.
The more you look into it.
Yeah.
But I will say one thing, and this is something which does makes me sad for what's happening with Israel at the moment. And this is a part of my bias. I have told you before,
Yes.
I am openly biased towards the existence of Israel. Right? I have a lot of friends who are Jewish. I
Yes.
grew up with them. But another thing that makes me openly biased is the fact I keep on reading about this shit from Israeli organizations.
Yes.
I don't read about it in Al Jazeera, and Al Jazeera has been on my reading list for the last 2 months.
Yes.
I read about it constantly in left-wing Israeli papers
Yes.
and left-wing Israeli magazines. And I love a society that self-regulates. Although increasingly they're not doing, they're being less and less effective about it. But I just want to flag that out there. All of this is coming from Israeli newspapers and Israeli groups. All right, now I want to talk about the pause quickly. It's not quickly. Hamas released 105 hostages in total, primarily Israelis. Israel released 240 Palestinians from jails. Humanitarian aid, 160 to 200 trucks per day over the course of the pause. There were 500 per day before the conflict. So that's still, even during the pause, it wasn't as good as before, but, it's something. All right, Qatar really paid off here. I want to read you a conversation which I read. I've talked some shit about Qatar and the fact that the Hamas's leaders have been camped over there.
Yes.
And so it's upon me to share with you a conversation I read with Patrick Theros, the US ambassador in Doha under Bill Clinton.
Yep.
And he's also the president of the Qatar Council in Washington from 2002 to 2017. So he kind of likes his Qatar, admittedly.
Yes.
But still, he knows Qatar as well. Question. A lot of people are angry at Qatar, charging that they're a Hamas ally. What do you say to them? Theros. Everything Qatar has done is either at the American request or with American approval.
Yep.
And he would know that.
Yep.
Question. The Washington Post ran a piece saying Washington and Doha agreed to have a serious reassessment of the Qatar-Hamas relationship at a later date, saying the US was now demanding that. How did you read that? Theros. I read that as there's a lot of people attacking Qatar, and Anthony Blinken had to say something. Hamas is there because we want them there. Question. Right. We don't want them in Iran. Theros. In 2012, Hamas was in Damascus, and Hamas was trying to stay neutral in the Syrian civil war. The Iranians were pressuring them to support Bashar al-Assad, and Hamas didn't want to do it. So at that point, it was clear Hamas would have to leave or just be co-opted by the Syrians, perhaps violently. There are 3 places that were considered: Turkey, Iran, or Qatar. The Turks said they weren't going to do it, and we would have gone ballistic if Hamas had gone to Iran, because then we would have lost all ability to communicate with them. They would have become a tool to the Iranians. And the truth is, we have no other way to negotiate hostages or anything. Question. Because it's just too important to have Hamas where they can be reached. Theros. Because they're doing it at our request. Question. Israel's relationship with Qatar? Theros. The Hamas-Qatar lines of communication are just as valuable and probably even more valuable to the Israelis. I mean, Qatar kept a lid on in Gaza at the cost of about $500 million a year for years. Every dime that Qatar spent in Gaza was approved by the Americans, who presumably checked it out with the Israelis, who might have ended up having to foot the bill themselves under the laws of war. Gaza is still occupied Israeli territory. Even though the Israelis have kept a distance from it, the occupying power bears full responsibility for the welfare of the population. So,
yeah,
that's good shit.
Yep.
So, anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. Anyway, Qatar are obviously responsible for the entire humanitarian pause.
Yes.
Right? So, let's give them credit for that. There's been a lot of propaganda during this, and I want to talk about a bit about some of that propaganda. First of all, the most incredible question of this entire conflict was asked by Sky's Kay Burley, who clearly passed on some extremely shoddy Hamas propaganda.
I was speaking to a hostage negotiator this morning. He made the comparison between the 50 hostages that Hamas has promised promised to release, as opposed to the 150 prisoners that are Palestinians that Israel has said that it will release. And he made the comparison between the numbers and the fact that does Israel not think that Palestinian lives are valued as highly as Israeli lives?
That is an astonishing accusation. If we could release one prisoner for every one hostage, we would obviously do that. We're operating in horrific circumstances. We're not choosing to release these prisoners who have blood on their hands. We are talking about people who have been convicted of stabbing and shooting attacks. Notice the question of proportionality doesn't interest Palestinian supporters when they are able to get more of their prisoners out. But really, it is outrageous to suggest that the fact that we are willing to release prisoners who are convicted of terrorism offenses, more of them than we are getting our own innocent children back, somehow suggests that we don't care about Palestinian lives. Really, that's a disgusting accusation.
That was an amazing question. I played it long because I wanted you to hear what he had to say.
Yes.
I could have played the question and then just laughed, right?
Yes, yeah.
Because it is a laughable question.
Yes, yeah.
But I wanted to play what he said because it leads in nicely to the next bit of propaganda.
Okay.
Which is that, actually, before I get to that, some more Hamas propaganda. There's been videos that have been put out about all the prisoners, the hostages smiling and laughing and like great mates with their hostage takers when they're released. That's obviously ridiculous. I don't know why people are outraged by that though. That's kind of expected though in a war.
Yes.
But the most ridiculous thing was some of the letters that have come out. There was a letter written supposedly by one of the mums who was there with her 5-year-old daughter as a hostage. And this mum supposedly wrote this letter to Hamas. And I want to read it out because it's pretty special propaganda.
Okay.
I should say there are potential translation issues with words with this kind of stuff because it's all obviously in Arabic, but I do my best. Oh, I didn't do it. Someone else did their best. To the generals who accompanied me in the past few weeks, it seems we will part ways tomorrow. However, I sincerely thank you from the bottom of my heart for your extraordinary humanity shown towards my daughter, Amelia. You were like parents to her, inviting her into your rooms, making her feel that you're not just friends, but truly beloved and good. Thank you for the many hours you spent as caregivers. Thank you for being patient with her and showering her with sweets, fruits, and providing everything even when it wasn't readily available. Children should not be in captivity, but thanks to you and other kind people we met along the way, my daughter felt like a queen in Gaza. In general, she acknowledges feeling like the center of the world. Throughout our long journey, we encountered individuals from various ranks up to the leadership, and each treated her with gentleness, affection, and love. I'll forever be a prisoner of gratitude because she did not, just imagine that wording, a prisoner of gratitude because she did not leave here with a lifelong psychological trauma. I'll remember your kind behavior granted her here despite the difficult situation you were dealing with yourselves and the severe losses you suffered here in Gaza. I wish in this world we could truly be good friends. I wish you all health and well-being, health and love to you and your family's children. That would be over the top on Airbnb, let alone in a hostage situation. So there's some propaganda out there. So you want to say something?
All I can say is I think whoever wrote that will be hired by the next Trump administration to write letters of asylum seekers whose children get separated from them.
There is actually one other thing. This is a lot less amusing, unfortunately. There was a bit of a dog, slightly concerning dog that hasn't barked yet, that might be about to bark, but it might be propaganda on the American-Israeli side. I'm not sure.
What's that?
It's possibly saying John Kirby's been doing the rounds a lot. Yep. He's the much more effective spokesperson than KJP.
Yes.
And Karine Jean-Pierre, he's a State Department spokesperson. He's been around a lot during the pause. Firstly, he explained an ongoing issue during the pause.
Hamas agreed to allow the Red Cross access to these hostages while the pause was in place. And of course, that didn't happen and still not happening. And it's unacceptable.
The Red Cross don't have access even though they were supposed to. Secondly, he said why, according to him, the deal broke down.
And I think it's important to remember, George, how this fell apart. It fell apart because Hamas was unwilling and refused to come up with additional lists of women and children, which we know they are holding, and put them on the list so that Israel could evaluate that and we could get them exchanged.
Now, crowdsourcing has identified supposedly 17 women still being held hostage. So apparently they exist. I guess we don't know if they're alive or not. But so why wouldn't Hamas want to keep the pause going longer by releasing more hostages, you might ask?
Yes.
This is the thing which I'm interested in.
It seems one of the reasons they don't want to turn women over that they've been holding hostage, and the reason this pause fell apart, is they don't want those women to be able to talk about what happened to them during their time in custody.
So that is an interesting little take from the State Department, that they suggesting that they intentionally were trying to not release all the women because they wanted to keep the ones that they abused and they didn't want them to talk. Now, I don't know if we're ever going to see any of these women again. I don't know. They might be dead. I don't know. They might be about to be dead. I don't know if we're ever going to know the truth here. But this may be another saga coming down the track. So I just want to flag people. But while I'm flagging your attention to it, and this may become a horrible story, I just want to also flag this may be propaganda.
It may be.
It's tough to know.
Yes.
There's no way we can know.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, so that is another sort of angle on this as well. Now, let's talk about the Israeli propaganda that I flagged before about the prisoners. The prisoners that are releasing, they're all terrorists. They're all they've been charged with these horrible things. These prisoners. Okay, I want to talk about the prisoners a bit. I mentioned on the show that Ben-Gvir told the Israeli police to deploy an iron fist to try and stop celebrations by Palestinian prisoners. He said, "My instructions are clear. There are to be no expressions of joy. Expressions of joy are equivalent to backing terrorism. Victory celebrations give backing to those human scum by those Nazis." Thank you, Ben-Gvir. You always help the situation. But of the 300 names that Israel proposed for potential release, the list that they came from, 233 of them had not been convicted of any crimes. They hadn't even been to a trial. Okay? They're categorized as under arrest for a series of nuisance charges. So like throwing rocks, threatening security officers, entering Israel illegally without a permit, associating with hostile or unknown organizations. One was arrested along with others because he cried out Allah Akbar at one point in time. One's been imprisoned for months for incitement on Instagram. These are not all hardened terrorists. So they're certainly not convicted at the very least. Now, I want to be clear. There are some nasty people there. There are some that have been convicted of attempted murder. Okay? There are some that have been charged with attempted murder. Even in the case, but a lot of them are just stone throwing. In fact, and I should say that even the stone throwing ones get serious sentences. You can get a 20-year sentence for stone throwing in Israel. And one of the Palestinians released had served 2 years for throwing a stone at a police vehicle, not a person, a vehicle. And remember, all this is happening while settlers are committing crimes apparently with impunity, but we'll get to those guys in a second. Let's talk about the Israeli justice system that these people are coming from. November 2023 data from the Israeli human rights group, Hamochad. It's all coming from Israeli human rights groups, this shit. Israel holds 6,809 security prisoners, in inverted commas. Of those, 2,313 are serving a prison sentence, so about a third. 2,321 have not been convicted in court. 2,070 are being held under what they call administrative detention. What's administrative detention? Administrative detention is where Israel gets to keep you locked up for months or even years without being charged with a crime. Israel says it's a counter-terrorism measure to stop people from planning future offences. They can keep you for 6 months, then they can reevaluate you and keep you for another 6 months, and another 6 months, and another 6 months. No charges required under administrative detention and no upper limit. We're not talking hard crimes here. They can be locked up for speech or just regular political activity. A 2022 Amnesty International report outlined Israel detaining hundreds of people, including dozens of journalists, for social media posts. And since October 7, Israeli forces have been aggressively policing what Palestinians say online. In terms of numbers here, what have we got here? Jerusalem journo, Daniel Seidemann, he's Jewish as well. This is a quote from him. In recent days, the police now no longer ask to see IDs. Instead, they've been asking to give the police their cell phones. Under law, this requires a search warrant, but the police interpret the law as a warm recommendation. The police then will begin to look at the content on the phone. WhatsApp messages, Telegram, photos, posts, etc. If they find anything objectionable, like an expression of concern re events in Gaza, the individual is arrested for 2 or 3 days, then released. We have no reports of people detained under these circumstances who were brought up on charges. So that's just what's going on generally at the moment. Since October the 7th, there have been more than 3,000 arrested under administrative detention, but they're cycling them through, in and out, in and out. So that's why the numbers aren't more than 2,000 in total. 37 of them have been journalists. Okay, let's talk about non-administrative detention, like the hard stuff. There's 3,700 Palestinian prisoners that have faced charges. Even when charges are brought against Palestinians, they don't face a proper court. They face a military tribunal. Those military tribunals have a 99.7% conviction rate. At least that were 2010 figures, according to Israeli data. Prison rights attorney said there are no fair trial guarantees in these courts. Palestinians are routinely denied counsel, according to the attorney, and faced with language barriers and mistranslations that taint testimonies and confessions used in court. Israel is the only country that routinely runs children through these military tribunals, By contrast, obviously, Israelis are tried in a civilian court with the normal civilian rules. Now, Israel says that it has the right to circumvent certain international obligations in the West Bank. This is where it is all happening. Because they say it's not part of Israel's sovereign territory, and therefore it's not subject to it's subject to military laws that can restrict people's civil rights. Amnesty disagrees. There is some due process. I'm not saying there's none. Palestinians can appeal their detention orders, but according to B'Tselem, the Israeli military courts nullified 1.2% of detention orders between 2015 and 2017.
Yes. By the way, if any peppers can tell Chaz how to pronounce this human rights
Please
organisation that he keeps citing.
Please do, because I'm going to keep on talking about them. I've read so much from these guys. Please tell me how to pronounce it.
Because I kind of feel it's probably not correct.
It's certainly not correct.
Yes.
I mean, if I wasn't too busy making notes, I would have looked it up. Okay. And there's been concerns about torture in these facilities as well. As I said, at least 4 Palestinian prisoners have died in Israeli custody in recent weeks. The head of the Palestinian Authority Commission for Prisoners Affairs said autopsies have shown they were tortured or medically neglected. Hundreds more prisoners have been wounded after being severely beaten, their limbs and ribs broken and their bodies bruised, according to the same commission. Ben-Gvir himself, that ever helpful man, posted a video from a visit to one of the jails where he was walking through and the Israeli national anthem was playing on loudspeakers at all times, which that's just torture. Like that's Barney the dinosaur all over again from Gitmo, yeah? Okay. So that's what the Palestinians get with their justice system. I know I'm taking a long time, but I'm going as fast as I can here. What do the settlers get in the Israeli justice system? According to Human Rights Watch, between 2005 and 2022, Israeli authorities closed 93% of investigations against settlers who attacked Palestinians without charging any suspects. That is also, those numbers have been confirmed by, once again, Israeli human rights group, Yesh Din. They got plenty of Israeli human rights groups involved in this. Only 3% ended in a conviction of any kind. This does not include the cases where Palestinians filed no complaints and no investigation was even opened, which I'm sure are the majority of the cases. Probably a substantial majority, I would expect. Settlers, now they've been an issue for a while. The violence between 2022 and August 2023 displaced roughly 1,100 Palestinians and emptied 4 communities. The UN found that while 81% of Palestinian communities reported incidents to Israeli authorities, only 6% said they were aware of Israel acting on the provided information. Yesh Din shows that over 99% of official Palestinian allegations against soldiers between 2017 and 2021 did not yield an indictment, let alone a conviction. It's gotten worse since then. 2022, 146 Palestinians in the West Bank and East Jerusalem were killed. In 2023, before October 7, it was 153 were killed. Since October 7, 232 Palestinians, including 61 children, have been killed by the ISF in the West Bank. In addition, 8 people were killed by Israeli settlers. Like I've said before, some of those people may have been the aggressors, the Palestinians. But you know what? I reckon right now they know what's going to happen to them if they're the aggressors. So I'm betting a lot of them aren't. I don't know, though. I don't want to make an assumption. According to Yesh Din, once again, there have been more than 185 settler attacks against Palestinians in over 84 towns and villages since October 7. At least 16 Palestinian communities, more than 1,000 people have fled their homes. Okay. And another problem is that to supplement their wartime forces, Israel's pulled 360,000 reservists, about 4% of their population, into the army. A lot of them are coming from the West Bank. A lot of them are settlers who then go back to the West Bank as soldiers. So now they're officially got the guns, even though they unofficially had the guns before. And they're the ones who are protecting the Palestinians now, right? They're the law and order. So that's another issue. And a 28-year-old Israeli veteran activist was quoted as saying, in the Times of Israel, since the war started, there's a situation where you can't even distinguish between a soldier and a settler. Since the start of the war, a lot of the weapons have been distributed to an already heavily armed population. So in any situation, they're all wearing uniforms or partial uniforms, and you never know if they're actually a reserve soldier or a settler. So there's a bit of double standard going on there. And all I would add to that, before you say whatever you want to say, is that Biden has been actually starting to talk about this for the first time that I know of for quite a while. They've delayed the shipment of 4,500 M16 rifles to Israel unless they provide guarantees the guns will not be sent to the West Bank. There's a 15,000 gun shipment that's due to go off as well. Ain't moving. Ben-Gvir has made a point of filming videos of him handing them off to people. Good on you, Ben. He issued in a statement that there was no delay in the shipment of M16s. These are just bureaucratic procedures, he says, that take a long time, often more than a year. Biden has also said there must be no forcible displacement of Palestinians from Gaza, no reoccupation, no siege or blockade, no reduction in territory. After the war is over, the voices of Palestinian people and their aspirations must be at the centre of post-crisis governance in Gaza. Gaza and the West Bank should be reunited under a single governance structure, ultimately under a revitalised Palestinian Authority, he says. The Poles might not like that. I'm talking the Palestinian Poles. As we work towards a two-state solution, extremist violence against Palestinians in the West Bank must stop, and that those committing the violence must be held accountable. The United States will take our own steps, including issuing visa bans against extremists attacking civilians in the West Bank. Netanyahu has replied by, I told President Biden that the accusations against the settlement movement are baseless. They're coming from a small, extreme minority, not the settlement movement as a whole, he says. This is kind of leading into what we're going to next week. So I want to leave it there. But do you have any thoughts about any of this area? No?
Nothing more.
Okay. All right. So that's basically a broad look at, first of all, the full context of these handovers for the hostages.
Yeah.
One side versus the other side, and also the background justice system that I think informs a lot of the attitude that is going on between the two sides.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's enough of that.
Yes.
Dave, talk to us about college football for a bit of a change.
All right. And for peppers who like to, get high or microdose or whatever before you listen, who might have found that last segment a bit of a bummer, well, you'll love this one because some of the names that I'm going to mention will seriously make you question your grip on reality. So there are 3 major issues going on in college football at the moment.
Yes.
The first one involves my beloved University of Michigan. Now,
is this the Michigan Corner?
This is a Michigan Corner, yes.
It's the Michigan Corner.
So Michigan has this glorious football history up until about World War II. And ever since then, Michigan has really struggled for relevance, at least nationally, in college football, although they've often been very good in the Big Ten Conference, which traditionally used to be the Midwestern Conference. In recent years, however, Michigan has got very, very good again. This is the third year in a row that they've made the 4-team National College playoff. However, they have been plagued this year by a cheating scandal.
Do tell.
Now, you might think, how is it possible to cheat at this game of football? The answer is stealing signs. Now, stealing signs is a venerable part of many American sports. So to explain how this works, the coach plays a very important role in football of basically calling the plays, right? The players on the field only have limited autonomy about what they do. It's the coach who decides what they do. Now, in the NFL, the coach directly communicates by headphone to the quarterback, but that's illegal for some stupid reason in college football. So instead, they have to hold up signs, coded signs on the sidelines in order to communicate to the quarterback and the team what they're supposed to do. Now, the obvious problem with this system is that the other team can look at the signs that they're holding, they can look at what that team is doing, and they can work out what the signs actually mean, so they don't come as a surprise. So this is a common problem in a lot of American sports. Baseball as well, where the pitcher and the catcher are the catcher is communicating with hand signs to the pitcher that the batter can't see. However, if there's a man on second base, he can see what the catcher is doing and he can potentially communicate that to the batter. Now, sign stealing is as old as baseball itself. I first heard about it when, I think in 2005, for some reason, I was watching the Little League World Series on ESPN because it was just the most bizarre cultural experience. And they were complaining about this team of kids from Louisiana stealing signs. But they do it in the major leagues as well. The Houston Astros, who won the World Series in 2017, were embroiled in this sign stealing scandal. So sign stealing, big part of all sports. Now, you can't exactly outlaw it because, you know, you're holding up signs. If someone else can work out what you're doing, well, can't really make that illegal.
Yeah.
But what the NCAA, National College Athletics Association, did make illegal back in 1994 was sending scouts to other teams' games to watch them playing other teams and work out from there what their signs actually are.
Okay.
Now, the reason why that was ruled out, it was actually an equity issue. It was because big, rich universities like Michigan could afford to do this shit and the smaller universities could not.
But didn't people know this was happening? Like, you don't have to put the signs out. You can use them in a room. You know, just teach your.
No. But this is on the field, right? On the field, you have to show that they're making decisions on the fly. The coach has to show the signs to the players. So there's no way of avoiding.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No way of avoiding the other team seeing it. Although, what you could do is switch those signs up fairly regularly, which is apparently something that has not been going on. Anyway, so
AFL do that, by the way.
Yeah,
They switch the signs.
This is the specific rule that has been broken, allegedly, by the University of Michigan. And yeah, just the same way that you explain your own bias, I'll explain mine. As I've said constantly, I got a PhD from the University of Michigan. I was there for 6.5 years. I went to many, many college football games, although I tailgated at more than I ever went to. So I do have a huge bias, towards Michigan. And I tend to find what they've allegedly done funny rather than serious. But anyway, I'll let you judge. So what was going on was that this guy who advertised himself as this ex-military coding specialist who was employed by the University of Michigan. His name was Connor Stalions. Connor Stalions was going to games at his own expense, going to games that other Big Ten teams were playing in and clandestinely recording their signs by holding up his cell phone camera during a game.
That's shocking.
Yes, yeah. And watching them. He was getting paid $50,000 a year by Michigan for whatever position that he was in.
Just to film signs.
Well, I don't know what he was actually employed to do. I think Michigan's saying he basically went rogue and was doing this on his own initiative. So he's been fired. And Michigan's claim is their coach, Jim Harbaugh, didn't know anything about this. Now, let me say a few words about Jim Harbaugh.
Please.
Okay, Jim Harbaugh was already suspended for 3 games at the beginning of the season for recruiting violations.
Oh, okay.
Offering a bit too much in the way of enticements to recruits. Now, look, my view about Jim Harbaugh before he became the coach of Michigan was that he was a petulant child and I couldn't even stand to see him on television because he coached in the NFL prior to this. So he took San Francisco to the Super Bowl in 2013 where he was defeated by his own brother, John Harbaugh, in a Super Bowl that was only memorable for the fact that the lights went out halfway through the game. The next year when I was living in Seattle, San Francisco played Seattle in the title game. And one of the reasons why I was thrilled that Seattle won that game is because you got to see Jim Harbaugh doing his baby shitting his pants look. Okay, but now he's the coach of Michigan, so I have to, well, not exactly like him, or not even really defend him. But anyway, Michigan is claiming that he had no idea of what was going on. And so the NCAA is investigating this. The Big Ten, the conference that Michigan is part of, which traditionally was a bunch of Midwestern universities, they, off their own initiative, suspended Harbaugh for another 3 games, for the 3 most important games of the regular season.
Because he may have known someone filmed signs.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, this sounds pretty fucking stupid to me.
It does.
On the other hand, I've got to admit, Michigan is over-egging a little bit the martyrdom of Jim Harbaugh. Yeah. Like when you see players or other coaches interviewed about this, they are crying. They're in tears about the fact that he wasn't allowed to go to these 3 games. He had to watch it from his house in Ann Arbor or from a hotel room. But whatever happened, Michigan won those 3 games he was suspended for, both at the beginning of the season and at the end of the season. They in the game that really mattered against Ohio State, the biggest and longest standing rivalry in college football, Michigan won for the 3rd year in a row, which is incredible because when I was there, they never fucking won. They lost 7 years in a row when I was there. They won the year after I left, but then lost I think another 10 years in a row after that. But now they've won 3 years in a row. And because the year before that was the pandemic year when they didn't play, it's now been more than 1,000 days since Ohio State has won that game. So fuck you, Buckeyes. Anyway, so Michigan won all of that. So they went undefeated and they won their conference title game. So they are now the number 1 ranked team going into the college football playoff. Now that brings me to the second big controversy in college football at the moment, which is who gets into the college football playoff. One of the amazing things about college football, what makes it what it is that there are just so many teams. Right? There are something like 130 teams in the top division of college football in about a dozen different conferences, although it's widely considered there are only 5 that really matter, which is the Southeastern Conference, the SEC, the Big Ten, which we've already talked about, the Big 12, which is kind of Texas and Oklahoma and the Great Plains.
So there's a Big 10 and a Big 12.
Yes, yeah, except the Big 10, I think, has something like 16 teams in it. And yeah, I don't know how many of the Big 12.
I feel like there are so many adjectives.
Yeah.
So many synonyms for the word big. Why can't they come with a different word?
That's a very good
12,
question.
The huge 12, the gigantic 12.
Yeah, you would think these are colleges. They could have English professors who could suggest other names. But anyway, there's the Atlantic Coast Conference and there's the Pacific 12, which is about to be disbanded. So traditionally in college football, the way that championships were decided was there would be polls of coaches and sports writers. And whoever came out number 1 at the end of the season, they were the national champion. There were post-season games, these big bowl events, but they weren't supposed to serve the role of a playoff. They were traditionally, say, the Pac-10 and the Big Ten would play each other in the Rose Bowl. Now, as a result of that, the national champion was always disputed. The best example of this was 1969, where Texas and Arkansas were number 1 and 2 respectively. Actually, I think Arkansas was number 1 going into that game, 1 and 2 respectively. And they were playing each other in the last regular season game, not a bowl game.
Yeah.
And Richard Nixon just declared, whoever wins this is the national champion. And he went and watched he was a huge football fan. He went and won. Texas won the game. Nixon declared, yep, they're the national champion. Penn State, who was also undefeated, was incredibly pissed off about that. Joe Paterno, the coach of Penn State, was writing to Nixon saying, I'm a lifelong Republican, but, this is a disgrace, blah, blah. Now, if you know anything about the subsequent history of Joe Paterno, you might be quite happy with Nixon about that. But anyway, so they tried to devise various systems to make it fairer or more objective or whatever. But the system that they've got at the moment, which is the top 4 teams go to a playoff, it's still got a heavy element of subjectivity. Those 4 teams are decided by a committee. Yeah. The reason for this is because they're all playing in different conferences. They rarely get to play each other until they get to the playoff. And sometimes it's pretty clear cut because it's very unusual actually to have as many undefeated teams as there were this year. So there were 3 undefeated teams from the so-called Power 5 conferences. There's the 5 that I just mentioned, and then there were a few one-loss teams. So this year, the real contenders were Michigan, University of Washington, where I also spent some time. They were also, it was very clear that they would get in because they won their conference and won some very impressive wins along the way. That was then when it got complicated. So the other undefeated team was Florida State, who was, they won the Atlantic Coast Conference, which is not considered as good as some of the other conferences, but still very good. However, Florida State lost their starting quarterback 2 weeks ago. And they were good enough to still win their conference, but there was some thought they might not do very well when they get into the playoffs. Then there was what really threw the cat among the pigeons was that the University of Georgia, which has won the last 2 national championships, had won the last 29 games they'd played, shockingly lost in their conference title game to the University of Alabama. Which has won the national championship something like 6 times in the last 12 years. So the University of Alabama had lost earlier in the season to the University of Texas, who had won their Big 12 conference title. Sorry if this is all getting looking like the notorious spaghetti graph, but it's just such a convoluted, fucked up system. Yeah. So anyway, someone was going to miss out big time. And what they decided was poor old Florida State was going to miss out, despite being undefeated, despite winning their conference championship. They said, without their quarterback, they're not the same team that they were 3 weeks ago. This, I got to say, is bullshit.
Yeah, that's farcical.
Absolute bullshit. There have actually been 3 teams that have won the college football championship in the last 10 years without their original starting quarterback.
Isn't that like the subject matter of every sporting movie ever?
Yes,
exactly. They overcome the odds?
Exactly. So what happened instead now, the most generous interpretation is they basically decided to forego results for guesses about what was going to happen. More realistically, they could not have a playoff without the Southeastern Conference. The Southeastern Conference is the epicenter of college football. They needed the winner of the Southeastern Conference, which was Alabama. Right. Now, Alabama is by just about any measure, the most storied and successful program in the history of college football. One of the reasons why their history is so great is because they've been good in so many different eras, not just like Michigan, who were only really good prior to the Second World War, or Texas, who were only good after it. Alabama's been good the whole way through. Under their legendary coach, Bear Bryant, they won, I think, 6 championships in the 60s and 70s. Under their current coach, Nick Saban, they've won 6 championships, as I said, in the last 12 years. So they are in the college football playoff yet again, along with Texas, the team that beat them at the beginning of the season. Texas and Alabama actually played for the national championship back in 2009 when Texas had their quarterback, Colt McCoy. Texas has these great quarterback names. Yeah. So their current quarterback is Quinn Ewers. And back in 2001, their quarterback was Major Applewhite. Although the best quarterback name ever, I think, was University of Georgia, Stetson Bennett, who then went on to become a bust in the NFL. So they all sound like they're from Westerns, right? And so they're probably all future Republican members of Congress. Anyway, Florida State got hosed, and fuck you, college football, for making me agree with Ron DeSantis about something, which was the fact that they got hosed. Now, okay, what you're definitely asking is, how are these playoffs going to go? What's your prediction? Well, I don't know. Even though Michigan is number one for the first time since 1997, the perennial problem with college football is that the Southeastern Conference is often so much better than everyone else that you don't actually get a sense of how much better they are until they start playing other people. So there is a serious danger that Michigan, as it has done in the last 2 years, is going to lose in the first round of the playoffs to Alabama. I don't really know. I actually would have said that Washington was the best team this year, just in terms of the quality of wins that they had and in terms of the quality of competition. Washington is also another historically glorious program, not quite as pedigreed as Michigan, but who kind of once were good, then lost a lot of relevance, then have become intermittently good again in recent years. Their heyday was actually in the 1960s when they were led by the great Sonny Six Killer.
Sonny Six Killer.
Sonny Six Killer, which is possibly the Native American guy most fantastic name in the history of college football. They won a championship with Sonny Six Killer. So I don't know. They will play. They'll play Texas in the first round, and I don't know who I would. I'd probably tip that because Quinn Ewers is out at the moment of Texas. So I don't know how it's going to go, but it's going to be complete chaos, whatever it is. Now, that brings us to the third issue of the season, which you've probably been asking, why haven't you been talking about Deion Sanders for the last 8 weeks? Well, yeah, look, the way that Colorado's season went, I mean, we were all very excited when they won their first 3 games. They've only won 1 game since. They are not going to a postseason bowl game. They are reportedly bleeding recruits. Like early on in the season, a lot of people from high school wanted to play with Colorado, including the 3rd highest ranked high school quarterback in the nation. Yes, the US being what it is, they do rank high school children nationally according to how good they are as quarterbacks, much the same way that Deion Sanders ranks his own children according to how satisfactory they are to him. So, look, they only won 1 game last season. So winning 4 games is a significant improvement, even if it was something of a drop-off after the first 3 games. He also was made Sportsman of the Year by some publication. I can't remember what it was. But most importantly, as you showed me, I didn't even see this.
Yeah.
There was a graph, if you want to put it up, showing that he is actually more popular among people of both political persuasions than a whole bunch of other coaches. Now, just to give context of who these other coaches were, the least popular, not surprisingly, is Michigan's Jim Harbaugh, who everyone thinks is a possible cheat as well as a petulant child. Nick Saban, who I mentioned, has won 6 national championships, but is basically hated by everyone outside of the state of Alabama and half the people in the state of Alabama. He's also down there pretty low. He's a future Tommy Tuberville, I think. Another one is someone that I've mentioned before, one of the people I regard as most loathsome people in college football, Dabo Swinney, the coach of Clemson, who won a couple of times, and to say he's just got an awful youth pastor vibe would really be doing a disservice to awful youth pastors everywhere. So it's really not surprising that Deion Sanders is more popular than any of these people, because college coaches are just some of the worst people in America outside of Congress. So look, that's your big update on college football for the year. I'm personally very excited about these playoffs, even if on some level I'm kind of expecting Michigan to bomb out of them as early as they always do. But we'll be back next year.
When is the final of this?
So the semifinals take place on New Year's Day in the US. They take place on the New Year's bowl game. I think that the final takes place on sometime in the second week of January. So.
Wow. You know when Planet America comes back. Second week of January. If you're up for it.
Yeah, maybe.
That might be the glorious return of Pep.
Yes.
Hey. There we go. I can't believe I took part in the in the college segment in my own little graphy way.
did.
That's fantastic. Okay, let's roll through this last one real fast.
Okay.
Now, we all know there's an anti-Semitism issue out there at the moment. Generally, New York hate crime figures between October 22 and October 23. Black hate crimes black victim hate crimes went from 1 to 4. Muslim hate crimes went from 0 to 8. Sexual orientation hate crimes went from 3 to 7. White hate crimes went from 1 to 2. Jewish hate crimes went from 22 to 69. 68% of total hate crimes this October were against Jews in New York. 48% of hate crimes last year were against Jews. So it's a perennial, okay? But it's become more of an issue recently. London, same kind of thing. 1,300% increase in anti-Semitic offences this October compared to the same period last year, from 15 to 218. Islamophobic offences went from 42 to 101. Okay, so that's some kind of comparison there. I've defended many of the pro-Palestinian protests on campuses, as you know, as a free speech guy. I don't believe that criticising Israel's conduct is anti-Semitic, but then you get people like Patrick Dye in Cornell who posted on his forums that he called for a mass shooting of the 104 West building in Cornell, which is a dining hall for kosher diets. He allegedly threatened to stab and slit the throat of any Jewish males he sees on campus, to rape and throw off a cliff any Jewish females, and to behead any Jewish babies. And he threatened to bring an assault rifle, quote, to campus and shoot all you pig Jews. That's anti-Semitic.
Yes, it is.
It is. As far as protests go, once again, you can protest the situation in Gaza without being anti-Semitic. But this protest I'm showing you now of people walking down the main street of Wisconsin with massive banners that are swastikas, that looks anti-Semitic to me, when they're open Nazis strolling down the street. Quite proud of themselves, I might add. Even in Australia, there was a story recently. I'm not talking about the Gas the Jews protest. You expect crazy stuff to be said in protests. I'm talking about the dude who when he was asked, he runs a jumping castle place in North Sydney, and when he was asked for a Jewish school for a jumping castle, he said, "There's no way I'm taking a Zionist booking. I don't want your blood money. Free Palestine." These are kids wanting a jumping castle. I don't know what their position on Israel is, but I bet he doesn't know either. I'm pretty sure their money wasn't derived from the slaughter of Palestinians, seeing as they were Australian. But anyway, Ezra Klein had an interesting point on anti-Semitism. I'll just note quickly before I get into the main point of this. Part of an interview that Ezra Klein conducted with Rabbi Sharon Bruce, which I would recommend on this podcast, The Ezra Klein Show, he said this: "I've been thinking a lot about the panic in the Jewish community about what gets shorthanded as anti-Semitism on campus. There is anti-Semitism on campus and on the left and on the right, always has been, but to read only the most anti-Semitic signs in a rally, to hear only the anti-Semitic chants, can also obscure what else is happening there. If it's just anti-Semitism, then at least it's simple. They just hate Jews. They hate us. They always have. They always will. But a lot of what's happening at these rallies is not anti-Semitism, not just anti-Semitism. A lot of it is a generation that's only known Israel as a strong nation oppressing a weak people. They never knew a weak Israel. They never knew an Israel whose leaders sought peace, showed up to negotiate deals, who wanted something better." And he suggests that that's the generation thing, that basically people under the age of about 35 or 40 have only known Israel as it currently is. People who are middle-aged, like me and Ezra Klein, knew a kind of in-between Israel, which was powerful but still trying to do peace. And the old people knew a weak Israel, and so that's why they're so on board, right?
I've actually got an anecdote about that.
Yeah, go on.
Which is in a bookshop in Tel Aviv a few years ago. I overheard a conversation between two guys with American accents. They were complaining about Breaking the Silence, which is another Jewish human rights group in Israel, led by younger people, which essentially takes tourists around and shows them security walls and things like that and talks about human rights abuses. And I heard one of these guys say, "Look, these kids might have a point about human rights." He said, "but they have no idea what it means to go to non-Jews and to rat on your fellow Jews." And he said that's because they've grown up as the majority. He said they don't know what it's like to be the minority. Anyway, not making any comment on that, just you're passing on that anecdote, which I think says quite a lot about that mindset. Yeah.
Well, so now where is this going? Where this is going is in that context, this ad was tweeted out, which I'd like you to watch, Dave, and I am going to just note it was made back in March by a group called Stamp to Jewish Hate. Nothing to do with the current Gaza situation. It was a retweet 2 weeks ago, though, and for those who can't see, who are listening to this, it begins with a father talking to his son in a truck, and it reveals in the end that they are actually parked in front of a synagogue, okay? So that's what you need to understand. You can hear the rest.
I saw what you've been posting. Hitler was right. I didn't teach you that. You hide behind your screen, spewing all this hatred and ugliness. You got something you want to say? Get out of the truck and say it to their faces.
So all very emotional there, especially for people who can't see it and just heard music.
Yeah.
But, okay, the ad finishes off with saying, Hitler was right, posted 70,000 times last year. There's no looking away from hate. Okay, so Dave, my question to you is,
yes,
do you have any objection to that ad, number one? And number two, can you guess the concerns that people had? Because people did have concerns with that ad.
Why don't you just go on?
Okay. The artist formerly known as Eric on X tweeted, okay, Jewish. I'll tell you what the objection was. This was in reply to this. The objection was that those two people in that ad were white. He says, okay, Jewish communities have been pushing the exact kind of dialectical hatred against whites that they claim to want people to stop using against them. I'm deeply disinterested in giving the tiniest shit now about Western Jewish populations coming to the disturbing realization that those hordes of minorities that they support flooding the country don't exactly like them too much. You want truth said to your face? There it is. Okay, now that guy's clearly a wanker. He uses the word dialectical for no reason whatsoever. What do you think of his point? Do you think it's a good point he makes?
That's basically the tree of life shooting logic.
Yes, it is.
That's
Yes,
the Jews are responsible for bringing in all these minority groups. So if I hate any minority group, who I really hate is the Jews.
Yes. His final post before he went to shoot 11 Jews and kill them was that the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society likes to bring invaders in that kill our people. I can't sit by and watch my people get slaughtered. Screw your optics. I'm going in. That was his logic. Okay, so now I don't even think you even need to point out that those concepts have been linked to mass shootings. I think they're toxic on their own, even without that.
Yes.
Because, of course, what that person is doing is collectively blaming Jewish people for left-wing social justice policies. Yes, Jewish communities are part of that. They're part of the left. They're also part of the right. Jewish communities are everywhere, especially in America. It's got nothing to do with being Jewish. It's about your personal politics, right? And this ad wasn't protesting. Well, this ad was protesting about people tweeting Hitler was right.
Yes.
It wasn't promoting hate against white people.
No.
It wasn't talking about immigration policy. It was just saying don't promote us being killed.
Yes.
Right. So I don't know why he's so offended by that. And the hordes of minorities, by the way, the quote hordes of minorities flooding the country, they're not hordes.
No.
I've established before, illegal immigration, the total number of illegal immigrants hasn't changed for the last 20 years.
Yes.
It's 11 million. 15% of America was born overseas. That is in line with history. We've talked about this on the show as well. That's just a historical level. It's nothing compared to Australia, by the way.
Yeah.
And that's not the result of wokeism. That's the result of America's immigration laws, which are not woke.
No.
And many of those immigrants are white and European, by the way, as well, for that matter, if we care about that shit. And he's blaming Middle Easterners for hating Jews because right now we're seeing plenty of homegrown white people and Asian people and black people hating. Patrick Dye was Asian, the Cornell guy, right? They're just like, it's all races. Anti-Semitism is around, okay? So why am I playing you that ad and talking about this?
I know the reason.
Because Elon Musk replied to that dickhead with, you have said the actual truth. That's why. Now, why would Elon Musk say that? He could have replied to any post, to anyone. Why did he choose to boost that post? Because when he posts, because he has this tendency to just take someone's post and just go, indeed, wow, I like it. And he boosts this post to Billio with his hundreds of millions of trillions of followers, right? So why would he pick that one? Of course it went crazy in response. Of course he got attacked because he just promoted the Tree of Life synagogue concept.
Yes.
90 minutes later, he realized he'd made a boo-boo and he tweeted out a qualification. The ADL unjustly attacks the majority of the West, despite the majority of the West supporting the Jewish people in Israel. This is because they cannot, by their own tenets, criticize the minority groups who are their primary threat. It is not right and needs to stop.
Now, if you're actually familiar with the ADL's work, the ADL criticises minority groups all the time.
Yeah.
If I were to place the ADL somewhere on a political spectrum, I'd actually place it on the conservative side of the spectrum. I mean, their major, their big issue is anti-Semitism, but it's impossible to actually look objectively at the ADL and say that they don't criticise minority groups.
Yeah. So tell us, Dave, because I know you know why Elon Musk is going on about the Anti-Defamation League.
Because the Anti-Defamation League keeps pointing out that he has turned Twitter into the safest space for anti-Semites in the world.
That's the reason why. They've criticised him a number of times, and he doesn't like that. He gets butthurt when people criticise him, right?
Yes.
And I should say that until now, until recently, they actually had quite a good relationship with him. Like it was last year they had their run-ins, and they made up.
Yeah.
And they've been advertising on X quite recently.
Yes.
So it was weird to bring it up out of the blue.
Yes.
Obviously, he didn't bring it up out of the blue. What he was doing was trying to justify his stupid tweet.
Yes.
And he was trying to think of a way to do it, right? Yeah. But we should note that, like Trump, and we'll come back to this again in a sec, he interprets anyone that's on his side as fine.
Yes, yeah.
And anyone who's not on his side is responsible for all the evils of the world.
Yes, yeah.
Which is annoying.
Yeah.
But anyway, and also ADL are not the entire Jewish community, we might add as well. As someone replied, they said to him, yes, but this is not fair to say or truthful to say that Jewish communities promote dialectical hatred towards white. Say what you want about the ADL. Don't generalize the Jewish community. And Elon replied, you're right. This does not extend to all Jewish communities, but it is also not just limited to ADL. And at the risk of being repetitive, I'm deeply offended by ADL's messaging and any other groups who push de facto anti-white racism or anti-Asian racism or racism of any kind. I'm sick of it. Stop now, he says. So why, if he hates racist hatred, is he boosting someone who said this is all about Jewish communities? He could have written anything. But anyway, and why is he focused on the ADL? He's done nothing because, of course, he's trying to. It's almost like he said something ill-considered and stupid and desperately try and backtrack by acting like he meant something else, which is another Trump phenomenon.
He did later on say that tweet reply was the biggest mistake he'd ever made.
I'm going to play that video.
When you see all this happening, are you sitting there going, oh my God, I stepped in it. I wish I didn't do that. Are you saying, screw them. I hate these people. Why are they after me?
But all of that. Yeah, all of that. Look, I'm sorry for that tweet or post. It was foolish of me. Of the 30,000, it might be literally the worst and dumbest post that I've ever done. And I try to my best to clarify 6 ways to Sunday. But at least I think over time it will be obvious that, in fact, far from being anti-Semitic, I'm in fact philo-Semitic. And all the evidence in my track record would support that.
There we go.
Now, it wasn't the biggest mistake he ever made. The biggest mistake he ever made was buying Twitter.
Yes.
I don't know if you'd even call it a mistake. Yeah. It was what he sincerely thought was a clever reply at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's the biggest mistake he made.
And I'll
tell you why.
Why?
Because screwed up his brain.
It really
That's why.
has.
Like, he has the most galactic case of Twitter brain I've ever seen. That's what I think is going on here. I don't think he's an anti-Semite. I don't think he supports the Tree of Life killer. I think he just sees stuff in his feed and goes, oh yeah, doesn't even think about it. Goes, oh yeah, wow, cool. And he gets off on the wave of love he gets from his cult, which he's definitely developing on Twitter. In a big and when people actually take that tweet as an endorsement of what he believes, he gets offended and butthurt.
Yes.
Like right in the middle of all this, he was tweeting about Pizzagate. I'll read this out for the listeners. I'll put that up here so you can see. I'll read it out for the listeners. Michael Scott from The Office says, Pizzagate is real. Pam says, no, it isn't. We have experts. Michael Scott says, they traffic children. Pam says, but we have experts. Michael Scott says, your expert just went to jail for child porn. And Pam is shocked. That's the meme.
What?
Musk forwarded that with a comment, does seem a little suspicious. Does it seem suspicious? It turns out the report they were referring to did not conduct an investigation of Pizzagate, and every man and his dog has debunked that stupid theory.
Yeah.
I don't think Musk is into Pizzagate. He just has Twitter brain. He just forwards shit along. He doesn't have any responsibility.
Yeah.
He doesn't, despite the amazing amount of power he has, he takes no responsibility. Spider-Man's uncle would really be disappointed with him. It's all power, no responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, he was developing Twitter brain before he bought Twitter.
But it's made it worse.
Like, remember when there was the rescue of the Thai children from the submerged cave?
That's right, yeah.
And Elon Musk wanted to do it with his submersible or something. But looking at Elon Musk's track record with vehicles, they're like, no thanks, we'll just get we'll get professional divers to do it. And he called the diver who did it a pedo.
This is what he does.
Yeah.
When he feels insulted by anyone, he just starts attacking the individual.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then if someone attacks him for that, he then gets offended.
Yeah.
Like, in fact, before, at the beginning of this podcast, we were making reference to people who say their opinions don't represent them, not the company.
Yes, yeah.
You said your opinions don't represent you in 2 hours' time.
Yeah.
Elon Musk is the only person I've ever seen who operates with a disclaimer, my views aren't necessarily representative of me right now. Like, he just tweets
what
anything.
I don't understand is, so he was 19 years old before the internet really became a thing. How does he have the brain of a 19-year-old poster now?
I don't know, but it's definitely getting worse because I think what's happening.
Yeah, no, it's going backwards in years. Yeah, he's down to about 14 at this point.
I think what happens is he has this adulation of his cult.
Yeah.
He feeds them constantly because it gives him more adulation. He loves it. But when he feeds them, it makes his Twitter feed or his X feed become increasingly filled with those guys who keep on trying to get his attention because they know he's going to forward it. Which means he takes in more of this shit and he puts out more of that shit and he becomes angrier and angrier at people who criticize him, which just makes it more and more pure. So it's definitely.
I am less convinced than you are that he's not actually a person with sincere far-right beliefs. Okay. I think he's got pretty far-right beliefs at this point. Okay,
maybe he does. Maybe he does. I mean, my personal view is there's just no way you can tell what he thinks because he just tweets anything. I don't think he – I mean, okay. I don't think – I'm willing to give him a ban for the doubt on being an anti-Semite. Yeah. By the way, for those who don't know, after this – I mean, we're about to tell a little bit more, but he went off to Israel to meet Netanyahu, which was ridiculous. But I wanted to give him a ban for the doubt on the anti-Semite thing. But I think – like, there's no way he genuinely has stopped and thought about Pizzagate and thought, oh, yeah, this makes a lot of sense, that the Democrats are all pedophile blood drinkers and they meet in the basement of a pizzeria. I don't think he thinks that. He just tweets anything. Yeah, he's just distracted. It's an inch deep his knowledge of anything other than his own companies. Yeah, and anyway. So then the white nationalists jumped on board. Tucker Carlson was loving it. He said that rich Jewish donors have been backing white genocide for over a decade. Thank you, Tucker. Once again, no genocide happening, just immigration. That's all that's happening, and not as much as they pretend. And there's Jewish donors on all sides of politics. And even if there weren't, even if Jews were all left-wing, but still all left-wingers aren't Jews. There's a lot of white left-wingers and Asian left-wingers. And why are we talking about just Jewish left-wingers? Unless we're anti-Semitic.
Well, yeah.
That's right.
I was going to say, there's a pretty obvious reason for this. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, all right. So then Media Matters jumped on board. Next day, look, to be honest, it's a little bit of a stitch up, but the Media Matters style stitch up, we're used to these.
Yeah.
It's they reported that X has been placing ads for major brands alongside pro-Nazi content and white nationalist hashtags, like, say, for instance, the hashtag Jews did 9/11. That's pretty anti-Semitic.
That's very anti-Semitic.
They also quoted ex-CEO Linda Yaccarino from October saying brands are now protected from the risk of being next to potentially toxic content. She added, if the content is lawful but awful, it's difficult to remove it from the platform.
Yeah.
But the company's new content controls would reduce advertiser risk. Well, look, it might have reduced advertiser risk, but didn't remove advertiser risk. And that's what the Media Matters showed. They showed all these next to big companies.
Point out, so it's Ed Zitron, who has a very good Substack called Where's Your Ed At, had a long post about this today where he pointed out Media Matters has copped a lot of flack for their methodology, which was just basically constantly refreshing until they saw these ads next to these anti-Semitic hashtags. The problem with that critique, though, is how many people on Twitter are constantly refreshing it.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah,
that is
true.
how a lot of people use it.
Yeah.
Especially Musk's fans.
Yes.
Their lives are constantly refreshing Twitter. Of course they're going to see these ads next to these anti-Semitic hashtags.
Yeah, that's true. And also, I mean, like Musk said that these were contrived experiences, right? Actually, let me just read you what he said. Media Matters created an alternate account and curated the posts and advertising appearing on the account's timeline to misinform advertisers about the placement of their posts. Yeah. These contrived experiences could be applied to any platform. Okay, so they had accounts with the brands and with anti-Semites and threw them together. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Of the 5.5 billion ad impressions on X that day, less than 50 total ad impressions were served against all of the organic content featured in the Media Matters article. For one brand showcased in the article, 2 of its ads served adjacent to 2 posts 3 times, and that ad was only seen in the setting by one user, the author of the Media Matters article. Media Matters article also highlights 9 posts they believe should not be allowed on X. Upon evaluation, only one of the 9 organic posts featured in the article violated our content policies, and we've taken action on it under our freedom of speech, not reach enforcement policy. Okay, right. So that's what he says. Now, first of all, yes, it's contrived, but the contrived experience that X describes is 1, creating an account.
Yes.
2, following users.
Yes.
And 3, observing the ads. That is how Twitter works. Sorry, Elon.
That's how Twitter makes money.
Every single user does that.
Yes.
Now, sure, Media Matters were trying to find a certain outcome.
Yeah.
But they were just doing what anyone can do.
Yes.
Like it's just, and he admits, by the way, that there were 50 ad impressions.
Yes.
So it happened to other people
who
weren't Media Matters.
Yes.
By his own admission.
Yes.
Right? And on top of that, he also freely admitted that 8 of the 9 posts that Media Matters highlighted as being problematic were okay by their own standards. He said only one of them didn't meet their standards. So that's kind of Media Matters' point, isn't it?
Yes.
And he also didn't rebut the monetization issue at all, which Media Matters was harping on, that all these posts make money with Twitter. Yeah. They encourage that. Like Andrew Tate gets $20,000 payouts from Twitter from their model. And they didn't even try to rebut that.
Yeah.
So there's that as well. So now Musk has sued them. And he's Mr. Free Speech has sued the media for not lying, just for publishing a viewpoint and investigation. Just to give you an indication of his state of mind while he was suing them, someone tweeted that Media Matters was caught red-handed with fake screenshots, and he said, exactly. No, they were real screenshots. Libs of TikTok tweeted, advertisers are taking their orders from a mentally ill man who dresses up as a woman. Someone at Media Matters is transgender. And then Elon Musk forwarded that with, wow. Like, it just random vicious attacks, you know? Anyway, so I was thinking about this. Now, maybe he's trying to appeal to the advertisers. He doesn't, because he's not going to win this lawsuit, okay? There's no world in which he wins this lawsuit. It's just freedom of speech, right?
Yes, yeah.
The only way you could win this is if they were lying intentionally, and they're not even lying; they're telling the truth. Right? Anyway. Maybe it's just a show for his advertisers.
Yes.
As a campaign, propaganda campaign to get them back. Right? Maybe. If that's the idea, it's pretty stupid.
Yes. Well, speaking of that, I mean, he's been on a real charm offensive with the advertisers recently, hasn't he?
He has. Let me just finish this, then we'll get to that. Okay,
yes, yeah.
We all know where you're going there.
Yeah.
But before that, he tweeted, "Many of the largest advertisers are the greatest oppressors of your right to free speech." So isn't that a great way to advertise advertise on X? If you advertise with us, we will abuse you if you ever stop. Join X. He might be trying to bleed Media Matters dry because he filed this in the Fifth Circuit.
Yeah, of course.
And the Reed O'Connor, so this can go forever.
Yeah.
Right, so it'll be appeal. It can go forever, and so it might be a financial thing. If so, that's not very Mr. Free Speech.
No.
But anyway, he is a huge hypocrite. We've established this. The Texas and Missouri Attorney General are saying they're going to get involved as well. So then the government is explicitly trying to silence the press because of their views. So it's like the opposite of the First Amendment. Anyway, and that aside, but Mr. Free Speech, in the first 6 months under Elon Musk, they approved 83% of censorship requests from authoritarian governments.
Yes.
Just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's get to the bit you want to talk about. Tell us about it.
So
I've got the videos,
for
obviously.
reasons I can't fathom, the New York Times invited him to their Deal Book Summit, which tells you everything you need to know about that event. Anyway, so there's this very earnest discussion with Elon Musk, where he was asked about the mass desertion of advertisers, and he said that the advertisers could go fuck themselves.
Let's play the whole clip.
This had been said online. There was all of the criticism. There was advertisers leaving. We talked to Bob Iger today.
I hope they stop.
You hope?
Don't advertise.
You don't want them to advertise?
No.
What do you mean?
If somebody's going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go fuck yourself.
But
go fuck yourself. Is that clear? I hope it is. Hey, Bob, if you're in the audience.
Well, let me ask you then.
That's how I feel. Don't advertise.
How do you think then about the economics of X? If part of the underlying model, at least today, and maybe it needs to shift, maybe the answer is it needs to shift away from advertising. If you believe that this is the one part of your business where you will be beholden to those who have this view, what do you do?
F-Y.
I understand that, but there's a reality too, right?
Yes. No.
I mean, Linda Yaccarino's right here, and she's got to sell advertising.
Absolutely. So, totally. No. Actually, what this advertising boycott is going to do? It's going to kill the company.
And do you think that
and the whole world will know that those advertisers killed the company, and we will document it in great detail.
But those advertisers, I imagine, are going to say, we didn't kill the company.
Oh yeah.
They're going to say,
tell it to Earth.
But they're going to say, Elon, that you killed the company because you said these things, and that they were inappropriate things, and that they didn't feel comfortable on the platform, right? That's what they're going to say.
And let's see how Earth responds to that.
So this goes back to
we'll both make our cases,
right?
And we'll see what the outcome is.
What are the economics of that for you? I mean, you have enormous resources, so you can actually keep this company going for a very long time. Would you keep it going for a long time if there was no advertising?
I mean, if the company fails because of an advertiser boycott, it will fail because of an advertiser boycott. And that will be what bankrupted the company, and that's what everybody on Earth will know.
But what do you think then of the... this goes back to the idea of trust, though.
Then it'll be gone. And it'll be gone because of an advertiser boycott.
But you recognize that some of those people are going to say that they didn't feel comfortable on the platform. And I just wonder and ask you and think about that for a second.
Tell it to the judge.
But the judge is going to be...
the judge is the public.
And you think that the public is going to say that Disney is making a mistake?
Yes.
And they're going to boycott Disney?
They already are.
He thinks that this is such a clever applause line that he keeps repeating, go fuck yourself, go fuck yourself, go fuck yourself. And, when he's asked, aren't you sending the company bankrupt? He's like, no, they're sending the company bankrupt.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are going to get blamed.
Tell it to the earth.
Tell it to the earth.
Such delusions of grandeur.
Tell it to the
As
earth.
if the earth gives a shit about Twitter anymore. The earth never did, and if they did before, they don't now.
Probably imagining himself saying this as he takes off on one of his glorious rockets to Mars.
Yeah.
Now, of course, he wouldn't get the chance to say it because the fucking thing would explode. But yeah, this is the thing about it. He's actually going backwards in years at this point. Who says tell it to Earth?
Yeah.
Anyway.
He does. And by the way, once again,
Yeah.
like you said, it's not my fault. It's the advertiser's fault.
Yes, yeah.
Once again, refusing to take responsibility. Remember that clip we played before?
Yes,
He had just apologized for the post and said it was the stupidest thing he'd ever posted. And even after that, he refused to take any responsibility for the consequences.
Yeah.
He thinks he's consequence free.
Also, is he imagining people are going to say, so when Elon Musk bought Twitter, then it went bankrupt. But it's totally not his fault. He's a great businessman.
I think
it's the fault of the advertisers.
It's the fault of Bob Iger. He just singled out a single
person. The fault
person.
of advertisers, they didn't advertise on Twitter. Now, it's worth pointing out, advertising is basically the only source of revenue that Twitter has. It's about 90% of its revenue. I mean, it sells subscriptions and stuff, but that's not actually that many. Not as many as he was hoping for. It is getting to the point where it's potentially threatening his other businesses. That's because he's got $1 billion in loans that need to be serviced every year. With Twitter, he's taken loans from SpaceX. And some of his other companies are having problems as well. Now, some of his companies are basically always going to be fine because they are always going to be able to command government subsidies. This is basically the foundation of his empire at the moment. It's the government subsidies to SpaceX and Starlink. Tesla's also in a good position, not because of the shitty deathmobiles that it makes, but because of the fact that it owns about 50% of the charging network in the United States. So that network cost is something that's pretty much baked into the system. Auto aficionados are saying that the Cybertruck is like the worst thing that they've ever seen, and presents an existential risk to the company. Probably not, because Tesla's basically a meme stock at the moment that is propped up by his fans. So, much like Trump, as long as he keeps his fans, it doesn't matter how much he fucks up.
And they're selling a lot of other cars.
Yeah. So anyway, he's made a lot of bad decisions, and as you say, hasn't really taken responsibility for any of them.
I got to say, I don't even think he's in a sound state of mind at the moment.
No, of course he's not.
Did you see the beginning of that press conference?
I don't think I did.
Okay, I'll just play this.
So I will certainly not pander. And Jonathan, the only reason I'm here is because you are a friend. What was my speaking fee?
You're not making any. First of all, I'm Andrew, but
sorry,
it's okay. Second of all, we've known each other for a very long time.
Andrew Sorkin. Yes.
And
listen, what I'm trying to illustrate is that sometimes I say the wrong thing.
For those who didn't quite catch that, he said, the only reason I'm here is because we're such good friends, Jonathan. and the interview said, my name is Andrew.
Yeah. And by the way, Elon Musk is the first person in the history of interviewing to be bettered by Andrew Sorkin. Andrew Sorkin is like the softball's softball when it comes to business. But
in all seriousness, he has talked about ketamine use before. I don't know what's going on, but there's something not right about him. And when he did the go fuck yourself thing, he was looking around for applause. He wasn't getting it. He went again. It just is, there's something not right about him at the moment. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, think about, you know what's bigger than the pool of companies that aren't advertising on Twitter at the moment because of this thing? The number of the companies that haven't yet begun to advertise on Twitter.
Yes, yeah.
Who are watching this and going, why the hell would I ever advertise on Twitter?
Yeah.
This is me in the future.
Yes.
Him singling out Disney is me in the future.
Yeah.
So, he could not have a better advertisement for why you should not advertise on Twitter. And Bob Iger, so just very quickly, I don't know why he's decided to go after Disney for, because they're only one company. It's not like they went on about this.
Because it's Ron DeSantis' favourite.
Maybe, but he's still going about Disney. He's still going about Disney now. He's tweeting out graphs going, why is Disney boycotting X yet spending millions on other platforms? And he's got these stupid graphs. I'll put this graph up here so you can just see there where it says relationship between platform usage and anti-Semitic / anti-Israel views, mixing up anti-Israel and anti-Semitic, by the way, which I hate. And if you look at the poll, it's only for those under 30, most of whom use TikTok anyway, which is the reason why TikTok is so big on that poll. But anyway, leaving all that aside, he's singling out Disney again.
Yeah.
This is what Bob Iger said. He was asked why he doesn't advertise on Twitter anymore. He said, I have a lot of respect for Elon and what he's accomplished. And we know that Elon is larger than life in many respects, and his name is very much tied to the companies that either he has founded or he owns, whether it's Tesla, SpaceX, or now X. By him taking the position that he took in quite a public manner, we just felt that the association with that position and with Elon Musk and X was not necessarily a positive one for us, and we would decide we would pull our advertising. So he's not talking about Media Matters.
No.
He's talking about Elon.
Yes.
That's the problem for him.
Absolutely.
Elon.
Yep.
And I think any sensible advertiser, that would be their problem.
Yes, yeah.
It's just too much of a wild card.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you were about to say? I interrupted?
On a highly speculative note, I think when we look back on this era, we're going to realise that the wild overvaluation of online advertising caused a huge number of problems. Online advertising always made claims that it couldn't back up.
Yeah.
It was always juiced up by very dubious numbers. Like advertising is, it's always a risky proposition. As Rebecca Giblin and Cory Doctorow pointed out in their book, Choke Point Capitalism, 50 or 100 years ago, like the CEO of Sears said, we put up these ads and we know they appeal to half the population. The problem is we don't know which half. That is always the problem with advertising. Always the problem with it. And anyone who claims to be able to target advertising effectively, which has been the big claim of online advertising, is often actually selling something that they can't back up. And you think of the enormous destruction that has been done to traditional media by the fact that so much advertising has migrated online, lured by promises that have never actually been backed up by the numbers that are involved. I don't know who specifically to blame here, but online advertising as an industry has had potentially pretty massively destructive effects on the world.
That's a great call. Okay, so I got one small point to make and then a wrap up in case you have anything else. The small point to make is that, just coming back to Trump again, I do think that I think Elon's a lot smarter than Trump, but I think they have a lot in common. I've already said a few things.
Yeah.
I think their cults are quite similar.
Yeah.
I think their personality weaknesses are quite similar.
Yeah.
I think they share the pathology of their base in the same way.
Yes, yeah.
This macho / insecure thing.
Yes.
Where they're simultaneously full of braggadocio and also insecure. Obviously, he just reeked of insecurity during that press conference. I thought, at the same time, trying to act as tough as possible looking around going, you see how tough I am? And then he goes on Twitter afterwards and he carries on with it, talking about the graveyard of his enemies and stuff. It's just ridiculous the way he carries on. But they love it. They adore it. You look at the comments in response to this, they think it's the best.
Yeah.
Because they see the macho and they feel the insecurity and the macho as well.
Yes,
it's all part of the same mindset, you know? Anyway, so that's just something I just find interesting. I don't know what's going to happen to those people, but they're all together. It's just, they're all going somewhere, wherever that is. But do you have anything else to say about this before I wrap it up?
No.
Okay. So it's a really funny punchline.
Yes.
Poor old Linda Yaccarino, the CEO of X, had to try and pitch for advertisers after this.
Wow.
And she went on Twitter and she wrote, X is enabling an information independence that's uncomfortable for some people. We're a platform that allows people to make their own decisions, and here's my perspective when it comes to advertising. X is standing at a unique and amazing intersection of free speech and Main Street, and the X community is powerful and is here to welcome you. To our partners who believe in our meaningful work, thank you.
Wow.
Now, that's a great attempt at spin, but that's not the funny bit. The funny bit is, as I scroll down to pull up a little tweet in reply, which I'd love you all to see, I'm going to put it up for you at home now. Rudy Giuliani, the real Rudy L. Giuliani, replies to that with 2 words, call me.
What?
Call me. I don't know why he wanted her to call him. I don't know why he felt the need to contact her that way, publicly in a Twitter reply when there are thousands of other replies. I don't know why that's the best he can do.
Rudy.
I don't know what's
Still got it.
All I know is Linda, do not call Rudy. That's all I know. Don't, Linda. If you see that tweet, I'm not sure you will, but if you do, resist with all your power. Resist the siren song of Rudy. Do not call him.
Wow. Yeah. I thought I'd followed this saga pretty closely, and I did not see that.
I always follow sagas just a little bit more closely than other people.
Expect that.
Dave, this was a doozy. It was worth the wait. I think everyone will agree.
I hope so.
And if it wasn't, we're back in 2 days.
That's right.
Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to go and finish off this episode of Planet America. I'll see you later on tonight.
Bye.
Stay peppy.